This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Naruto was adapted by Hermione Granger. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Hermione screamed, You, bastard, breaking the stillness of the chilly December night. Her husband was staring at her with saucer wide eyes, his hands still encircling the girl who appeared to be caught between shock and bewilderment. Hermione. What are you doing here? He exclaimed. What am I doing? What are you doing? I take time off to be able to come back early to celebrate our anniversary and find you making out with some girl, on my couch. I thought you'd be home late today again. Ron quickly gathered his belongings, including his flannel shirt that had ended up on the floor, and headed out of the house, saying, and that's an excuse for cheating. I can't believe you, out. Get out of my house, now. Expect my lawyer to contact you about our divorce during the week. Hermione's brain, supplied daughter, Demelza Robbins, was a bit slower. With harshness, she asked, what do you want? She began, I'm sorry Hermione, before Hermione could stop her. He told me you guys weren't together anymore. If I had known I never would have done this. You were always there for me back in school, so I just wanted you to know that. Hermione was overcome with emotion as she left. He had informed the girl that they were no longer together. That made it worse somehow. She noticed a photo of herself and Ron riding a roller coaster on the mantelpiece. After the war, she had brought both of her boys there. The three of them on a day out in the Muggle world. No reporters, no cameras, and no staring. After that ride, Ron had proposed to her. Before she knew it, the picture frame had been blasted to pieces while she was holding her wand. The same thing happened to all the other photos of her and Ron. It was the same with the garish vase he'd given her for Christmas a few days prior, brimming with the most hideous flowers ever. She sobbed as she curled into a ball in the center of her living room, exhausted. The following morning, Ginny and Luna discovered her in this manner. She had exhausted herself into a fitful sleep and was curled up in a ball, her face streaked with dried tears. She was gently shaken, and someone said, Hermione, wake up. Go. Way, the voice repeated, Hermione, wake up, come on. She groaned softly, no. Hermione, you're going to be late, Professor McGonagall's class is starting in 5 minutes, said another voice. She sprang to her feet, just avoiding Ginny's head as she did so. Luna grinned. Works every time. She gave her two friends a perplexed look. Everything suddenly came flooding back to her when she looked at one of the shattered picture frames. She gave a crying cry. Hermione. Go away. No, we're not leaving until you explain what you were doing sleeping in the middle of the floor. I don't want to talk about it. Too bad. You don't have a choice. Luna, get her to the shower. I'll get started on breakfast. We'll talk over coffee. Lacking the energy to argue, she allowed herself to be led to the shower, where she was left alone after Luna assured her that she could undress herself. A worried redhead handed her a cup of coffee when she staggered into her kitchen 15 minutes later, her long hair dripping wet down her back. Talk. Realizing she had no other option, she gradually told the girls the story. How she would surprise Ron on their anniversary by returning early. What the girl had said before she left, and how she had discovered him playing tonsil hockey with Demelza. When she finished, she looked up to see Ginny furious and Luna staring at her with that vacant expression. She was unable to reply, saying, that git. No worries, Hermione, after I'm done with him he won't be able to walk straight for a week. Just you wait, we've got you covered. She simply took a quiet sip of her coffee. Luna, stay with her. I'll get this straightened out. The girls were concerned about her silence. They would have been prohibited from interfering by the Hermione they knew. Ronald wouldn't have been able to walk for a month, so they wouldn't have needed to. Ginny flowed back to the burrow, where her brother had most likely fled to, in a blaze of green flames. Since he wasn't present when Luna had woken her up and found her in the morning demanding that they go see Hermione, she knew he wasn't at Harry's. She had simply stated that they had to leave without providing an explanation, and by this point Ginny had become accustomed to Luna's peculiarities and no longer really questioned such things. Hi, Mum. Ron around. Hello Ginny. Yes, he's crashing in his old room. Poor boy. Came back late last night, told us Hermione had come home and kicked him out of their flat. Ginny halted. Kicked him out, huh? Did he say why? Well, he said he had a friend over and Hermione overreacted. Said he couldn't be inviting friends over without her say so. Bit harsh, if you ask me. So Ronald didn't tell anyone. It appears that he would even allow their mother to believe it was a male friend. This would work for her. Do you need him for something? She took the mug of coffee her mother had given her and sat down at the kitchen table, saying, oh, it's all right. I'll wait until he comes down. Her mother's coffee was something else entirely, but she made good coffee. He reappeared 5 minutes later, still wiping the sleep from his eyes. When he saw her, he froze, but when she didn't approach him, he calmed down and sat down at the table where his mother had placed a plate of bacon and eggs. How are you feeling, dear? Better, Mum. Thanks for letting me stay here last night. Oh, dear, it's all right. You'll always have a home here, don't you worry. Ginny pretended to be happy and said, Mum told me Hermione kicked you out, Ron. What happened? Her mother caught it, but Ron didn't. She gave her a strange look. His coffee choked him. Oh, I had a friend over and she flipped. Said she was tired and how dare I invite someone without her say so, barmy. Ginny clenched her jaw. He was unbelievable to her. How dare he attempt to place Hermione at fault in this situation? But she had to comply if she wanted her mother to be even more upset with him. That doesn't sound so bad. I know, right? Mental, that one. Always coming home late, and then she flips because I invite people over to keep me company. But I'm done with her, Gin. Good for you, Ronnie. You don't need a woman like that in your life. Ginny looked straight at Ron, ignoring her mother. She took another sip of her coffee and watched the fireworks. Yes, I imagine you are. After all, having your wife walk in on you without a shirt while making out on her couch with a girl who isn't yet out of school on your anniversary does tend to end marriages rather quickly. It may have been satisfying to send a bogey hex his way, but it was much more satisfying to watch their mother scold him for lying as shamelessly as he had and for cheating. She drained the cup and picked up another toast from the plate, making a note to ask Professor McGonagall for access to Dumbledore's pensieve later to show Hermione. Hermione was still staring into her now cold cup of coffee when she returned to her home. She couldn't stop thinking about her husband's betrayal. It was the final of many negative events that had befallen her in the 5 years since the end of the war. The first was the information that her parents' memories could not be restored. The understanding that, despite everything, their fucking society had hardly advanced toward equal rights for Muggleborns and other magical creatures. Although it wasn't as obvious as it once was, discrimination still existed. Within her, something shattered. The sense of loss it left behind told her it was something significant, even though she wasn't exactly sure what it was. She felt empty. She instantly realized what she needed to do after having that thought. She had to go. Observing the look on her friend's face, Luna identified the instant Hermione knew she had to go. Naturally, she had suspected this for weeks, but she knew Hermione wouldn't be able to stay as soon as she told them about Ron's betrayal. She felt sorry for her companion. With her career in the Department of Mysteries, her mastery of transfiguration and ancient runes nearly complete, and her friends who would miss her, she left her life behind in this manner. She wanted to be of assistance. Her thoughts were interrupted by Hermione's broken, soft voice. I have to leave. I know, she said. I don't know where I should go. We'll figure something out. My father traveled a lot, as you know, even if he prefers to stay at home and manage the Quibbler now. I'm sure he can suggest something. Are you sure he won't mind? Of course not, Hermione. You are my friend, and more than that, I owe you my life. He'll be happy too. They arrived at the Rook after 2 pinches of flow powder and a brief note to Ginny in case she returned before they did. Now, the only 2 Lovegoods remain. Luna and her father, who was sitting at the kitchen table drinking a cup of something. The Rook was the Lovegoods' ancestral home. Hey Dad, Luna said with a smile. Hello, my pumpkin seed, and Miss Granger, I see. What brings you lovely ladies to our humble abode so early in the morning? Well, Daddy, Hermione here has been hurt very badly recently and would like to take a break from Magical Britain, and we were wondering if you had any suggestion as to where she might go. Xenophilius took a critical look at Hermione. After doing this for about a minute, he stood up and vanished down the corridor. Luna and Hermione silently followed him. He went into what turned out to be his study, a room on the right. He then pulled out a journal and gave it to her daughter. When Luna opened it and saw the title, she was shocked and looked up at her father. Are you sure, Daddy? The elemental countries? He turned to face Hermione, who had yet to respond, and said, Quite sure, pumpkin seed. What she needs, she'll find there. I'll draft a letter for you to take to my old friend Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. You'll be welcome there. Before Luna took her by the hand and led her to the sitting room so they could flow back to Hermione's apartment, Hermione could only mumble a brief thank you. She needed to pack a lot. Hermione's apartment was in a state of chaos when Ginny arrived later. Things were being shrunk and put away in various boxes, some marked storage, and some travel, while others were floating through the air. What's going on here? I'm leaving. What? Hermione, you can't leave. Don't let what my prat of a brother did make you leave. The pain in her friend's eyes made her nod. It's not just that, Jin. It's everything. I just need a break. What do you need? Ginny nodded and flowed back to her and Harry's house. Could you get Harry? She asked. A few minutes later, she returned with a frazzled looking Harry who had been told where Hermione was going. He understood Hermione's decision, even though he disagreed with her desire to leave and was very angry with Ron. It's safe to say that he had more than one desire to vacation in the magical world. In a few weeks, he might accompany Hermione wherever she went. She sounded a little doubtful when she said, "So all I have to do is make contact with this Nakamura Amy after getting to Kyoto and she'll help me get to the elemental countries?" After all, she was facing Xenophilius Lovegood. Yes, Nakamura-san guards the rift that serves as the entrance to the elemental countries. Be sure to tell her you want to go to the Land of Fire, and to make your way to Konohagakure no Sato before you do anything else. This is a dangerous land to be traveling alone in. I know how to protect myself, she remarked, sounding a little irritated. Here, you do. I'm afraid you'll find yourself to be sadly inadequate to go head to head with the chakra users of that land. They are trained warriors, whose sole purpose in life is to be the best, and they start training for that at a very young age. One last thing. What we call magic, they know is part of chakra, the spiritual part, to be specific, and use it in very different ways. For one, they don't use wands or other kinds of physical foci, instead channeling their chakra through hand gestures, seals, and for some of the most advanced ones not even that is necessary. While I know you have more than a passing knowledge of wandless magic, your skills simply won't be up to par for a confrontation with them. Hermione hesitated. No one truly knew where she stood, even though she knew he was talking about her more public abilities. She was confident that she could defeat any Auror without exerting any effort because the training required to become an unspeakable was nothing short of extensive. When she realized the standard for unspeakables, she was furious, but then she recalled that they had avoided the war. She eventually understood their motivations, but she was still upset. She was interrupted from her thoughts by hearing her name called twice in a row, but she pushed the thought to the back of her mind. Miss Granger, were you listening? I'm sorry, Mr. Lovegood, I got distracted there for a bit. What was the last thing you said? She blushed a little when she realized he knew she didn't really intend to return. That after you get to Konoha, you should make contact with Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Hokage of the village, and give him this letter. It will prove to him that you know me and should smooth the way down for you to be able to settle there, however permanent or not you want that settlement to be. Her heart had been telling her that this was a one-way trip and that any more visits to magical Britain would be just that, visits, after reading Mr. Lovegood's journal about the elemental countries and shinobi. Sure, she still had some things to do here, and new ideas kept coming to her. Thank you, Mr. Lovegood. Nonsense, Miss Granger. And I must insist you call me Xenophilius. Mr. Lovegood makes me feel old. Only if you call me Hermione. While the elderly man read and reread the letter she had given him about 10 minutes prior, Hermione fixed her gaze somewhere behind his shoulder. The old man reminded her so much of Dumbledore that she was still a little uneasy. However, nothing about Sarutobi Hiruzen gave the impression that he was harmless, whereas Dumbledore had always appeared to be nothing more than a kind old man until he let go of the strict control he had over his strong aura. This elderly man was unmistakably a seasoned warrior, even in his advanced years. He sighed and set the letter aside to focus his intense gaze on her, grumbling something that sounded very much like, "That crazy Mahu user." As I understand from this letter, you seek to settle here in Konoha. Yes, sir. May I ask why? She made the decision to be honest because she knew that lying and half-truths would not be acceptable. She then told him about the war, her parents, her unfaithful husband, and a magical society that would not change, despite the fact that the war had started because of its stagnation. She wanted a fresh start after her divorce, and she was also excited about the prospect of learning new things in this world that was both a part of her own and a part of the world. He chose to give the girl a chance at a new life because he could sense no deception and felt sorry for the broken soul in front of him. But like all shinobi, he had a secret agenda. He had witnessed some of Lovegood's abilities, and he had to admit that he was intrigued to learn that it was the same energy that shinobi themselves could use. The Konoha shinobi would benefit from some of the items and gain a much needed advantage over the other villages. Very well. Lovegood.san informs me that you are very well off economically and have brought some gold bars to exchange for our local currency. I'll have one of my Anbu escort you to the bank so you may exchange some for Ryo while I go through the deeds of some of the unoccupied residences that may suit your purpose. We shall meet back here in 2 hours, not an inquiry. Hermione nodded and awaited a member of the Hokage's Anbu guard to guide her to the bank. The idea of being well off made her laugh to herself. It's true that the ministry gave her, Harry, Ron, and others a sizable gift for her part in defeating Voldemort. However, her own modest lifestyle and good fortune in investing more than tripled that amount. Even after she married Ron and he moved into her apartment, she was able to control her spending, something he had always griped about after wasting his own settlement on parties, brooms, and, she now suspected, women. She was now the proud owner of a Konoha bank account with enough zeros to buy her a house and enable her to live comfortably for a few years without doing much work, thanks to a quick trip to the bank. She could use a vacation, but it's not like she would never work and spend that money. Wasn't that the reason she was here? Since she wasn't feeling particularly talkative and her Anbu companion hadn't said anything yet, she relished the quiet and used the opportunity to explore the village. Quaint was the first word that sprang to mind, but it wasn't quite right. It was vaguely reminiscent of Hogsmeade. She could see the shinobi making purchases as she strolled through the market. When she noticed 3 young shinobi carrying groceries, she nearly fainted. When she enrolled in Hogwarts, they couldn't have been much older than her. Only shinobi who had completed the academy and were therefore regarded as adults wore the Hitai.8 with the village symbol, according to what she remembered from the journal, which she would read again at the earliest chance. He made a sound to let her know he was paying attention. Excuse me, Anbu-san? She was about to say, children, but decided that since they were regarded as adults, she could at least refer to them as such, even though in her mind they were still children. Just how old are those shinobi? My guess, he replied. She nodded in agreement with his response and began to follow him back to the tower. Would be between 13 and 14 years old, Mahu. Sama. The newest generation won't graduate for at least 6 months, and most shinobi graduate by the time they're 12. I'd say they're from last year's generation. As they approached, they noticed a group of 10 or so people stumbling and attempting to flee after a small orange blur that nearly brought Hermione to the ground. Naturally, the Anbu had leapt aside to avoid being struck by the blur. In an attempt to reach the person who had pulled the practical joke, the crowd, who all seemed to have had their legs tied together with rope, were yelling obscenities and falling on top of one another before getting back up. Hermione turned to her Anbu escort after they were finished. Is this kind of thing normal? Sometimes. That was Uzumaki Naruto. He's an orphan and a shinobi trainee who enjoys playing pranks on people instead of utilizing his time to train or study. Ah. Yes, exactly. Being smarter than most, she could see that the child's antics were probably an attempt to get attention, just like the twins back home. Though most orphans went through the same ordeal, she questioned what would make him so desperate for attention. She had witnessed that enough in the war. Torn orphans. The Anbu said, by your leave, Mahu. Sama. Before making a hand seal and disappearing into a leaf swirl. She went into the tower by herself and sat down to wait for another summons to the Hokage's secretary's office. Hermione was shown back into the office after a short while. She sat on the seat in front of the Hokage's desk and placed a copy of her bank statement in front of him. She saw his eyes widen a little as he read what she had said, but she said nothing more. He hardly waited for her nod of approval before saying, I've compiled a list of possible properties you might be interested in, Mahu-san, if I may call you that. Your name is quite a mouthful, I must say. He handed her 3 pieces of paper, each with a photo on it, and said, they're all near the edge of the village, which in case of an attack is a disadvantage, but given what I know of your abilities, I'm quite sure you'll be able to protect your property adequately. Are located near our library. While most of it is inaccessible to civilians, I'm sure we could come to an arrangement where you could share the discoveries of your studies in exchange for permission to study some of the texts only available to shinobi. After all, while not strictly the way we do, you can use chakra yourself. She nodded and looked at the 3 pieces of paper, smiling at the old man's cunning. One was a flat, which she threw away right away. She desired a large, well-designed home with a garden. A property just around the corner from the library caught her attention. It was a medium-sized home with a kitchen, dining area, sitting room, office, and 2 bathrooms in addition to 4 bedrooms. She could live with having 1 more room than she had desired. Additionally, it had a sizable plot of land where she could construct a shelter that would double as a laboratory for potions and still have space for a garden. She could easily afford the asking price, even though it was a little more than the other 2 properties. Although it required some repair, she could likely do the majority of it with her wand and the home repair books she was already considering having Luna and Ginny order for her when she got home. It would be good. When she gave the Hokage her option, he promised to get in touch with the owner to complete the transfer. While they resolved that and the house was restored to livable condition, he would point her in the direction of an inn. A few hours later, she was seated at the table facing the kind-faced Chunin who possessed the property she was determined to buy. The Hokage had informed her that he was the last member of his line and that his name was Amino Uruka. Since he had never had the heart to live there again, the house had fallen into disrepair after belonging to his parents, who had perished in an attack on the village a little over 9 years prior. She assumed that few people would be interested in a house that size, even though he had only listed it for sale about a year ago. The Hokage tells me you were interested in buying the Amino residence, Mahu.san. Before responding, she helped herself to some juice and swallowed the bite of ramen she was eating. Yes, Amino.san. I've recently moved to Konoha and am looking for a residence to suit my needs. Your property is ideally located and has more than enough space for my intentions. As it is, it needs serious work in terms of repair, but I should be able to handle it without much fuss. Hokage. Sama told me it used to be your family home? Almost as quickly as it appeared, a shadow passed across his face. He couldn't enter the house without experiencing the pain of losing his family again, but he had no reason to tell her that. Yes, Mahu.san. In fact, it has belonged to my family for generations, but I'm the only one left and it is much too big for my taste. Following dinner, they settled into the property negotiations, where Hermione discovered she could hire a group of genin to assist her in remodeling the house and even constructing the shelter she desired on the property. Since she was aware that wizards weren't particularly concerned with how the property turned out after magical repairs, this allayed her worries about using magic to fix it. Although she cherished the burrow, she had to acknowledge that she wouldn't want to live in a home that appeared to be supported solely by supernatural forces. Both parties were satisfied with the final price after some haggling, with Hermione free to begin searching for a team to assist her with the renovations the following day and Iruka adding a substantial amount to his own accounts. She ultimately had to pay for 3 genin teams to come out every day for 2 weeks to complete all the work she wanted done on the property because it was such a large project. They were only D-ranked missions, which she was okay with because there was little to no chance of getting hurt because the more expensive the missions, the higher the rank. She started by ordering the kitchen and pantry to be renovated, then she stocked up on food and drinks and made lunch for the genins and their junin. They initially told her it wasn't necessary, but she insisted on feeding them while they worked for her, and they eagerly embraced her sandwiches and other foreign foods. She would then disappear into the main room, which included the office and a bathroom, while the genin worked on other parts of the house until lunchtime. After moving into the house by the end of the first week, she began visiting every store in Konoha that sold furniture and other necessities, buying whatever caught her eye and fit her vision for her new home. She separated her extensive collection between her study, which kept the more esoteric texts under lock, key, and wards, and the sitting room, which featured a bookcase covered in glass panes that covered the entire north wall because the house lacked a library. By the end of the 2 weeks, the little shelter that would serve as her potion lab was completed, and her house looked nearly brand new. She made arrangements to have the furniture she had not yet picked up delivered the following day and went to bed after contacting the people who had sold it to her. She thought it was a good beginning to a wonderful new life. Hermione established a routine and the following months went by without any problems. Every 3 days, she would visit the market to purchase fresh groceries after taking a morning tour of the village. She would check on her long-term potions and perhaps brew some of the quicker ones when she returned home. She was planning to start a business selling healing potions to shinobi in the village hospital, so she was stockpiling all the ones she knew, which were quite a few. In addition, she was producing a batch of Veritaserum, which she intended to give to the Hokage as a token of appreciation for assisting her in adjusting. She was certain it would be useful to him. She prepared lunch after that, and spent the afternoons studying magic or one of the books she had checked out from the Konoha library. Since the books and scrolls on Fuinjutsu were so similar to ancient runes, the subject she had been obtaining one of her masteries on, she was especially interested in them. Before she made the decision to relocate, she was actually halfway through her final projects for both ancient runes and transfiguration. Thus far, she had discovered that certain abilities that were achievable with Fuinjutsu could not be duplicated using ancient runes, and vice versa. Additionally, some of the things that could be done with both worked better with one than the other. Lastly, the evenings were spent reading a little and eating dinner, which was typically leftovers from lunch or takeout from one of the many restaurants in Konoha. She also made it a point to practice magic in general and work on her masteries for 2 evenings every week. After all, she didn't want her hard-won abilities to become rusty. Hermione's life in the elemental countries began at that point. She had a great time even though she didn't go out much. She had been residing in Konoha for 2 years before she realized it. She ran into Naruto once more while strolling around on a warm morning. Since she lived on the opposite side of town from the academy and hardly ever visited the Hokage's tower, she had not seen him since the morning she arrived. The boy had just turned a corner at full speed, looking back, and failed to notice her. As a result, he crashed into her, sending both of them to the ground. When they saw him sprawled over the unfortunate witch, The villagers who had been pursuing him turned the corner and began shouting obscenities at him. "You, demon! Get off from Mahu! Sama! How dare you!" Immediately, Naruto leapt off her and began to apologize. He was aware of the witch Mahu Sama, who had relocated from the outer lands to Konoha. Who hadn't? For months after her arrival, rumors had been circulating, but she continued to be a recluse. Everyone had at least heard of her, and it appeared that the majority of civilians, at least those who watched the stores she visited, were familiar with her. But Hermione merely grinned and reassured the worried citizens that she was fine. The dirt that now covered her shirt and pants flew away and landed on the ground with a wave of her hand. The dirt that covered Naruto, which was much more, followed another wave. "Mahu Sama, don't concern yourself with the demon. He's no good, I assure you, and not worth your attention," said a villager. The boy's hurt expression after hearing those words made her angry. "Demon, Sato-san? I see only a child in dire need of a good meal and new clothes. Tell me, what has this boy done to be treated to such a name?" She got her fresh fruit for the week from Sato-san, who was about to reply but changed his mind when he saw her angry face. Although he was unaware of her full potential, rumors circulated that she was capable of feats that shinobi could only imagine. Hermione was not above using her reputation to shield the child, even though the information from the other countries was, at best, dubious. "I'm sorry, Mahu Sama, but the child poured a bucket of glue on Ryo, and then followed with a sack of feathers. "My poor Reika will cry when she sees her puppy." She looked sharply at the boy, whose head was now bowed, and asked, "Is this true?" "Yes, Mahu Sama." Then apologized to Sato-san. "That is no way to treat a puppy." "I'm sorry, Sato-san," he muttered. "I didn't quite hear that." He said, "I'm sorry, Sato-san," a little louder this time. He was about to object, but he stopped when he saw Hermione's eyes. "Good. Now we will accompany Sato-san and undo what you did on his poor puppy. After that, you and I will have a talk, kid." "Yes, Mahu Sama." The quiet child trailed Hermione and Sato-san all the way to his fruit stand. He saw something heartbreaking there. Just 30 minutes ago, he had pranked the puppy with joy, and now he was whining and attempting to scratch the feathers he had adhered to his fur. In areas where the scratching had clearly drawn blood, there was a red hue. Before putting the puppy to rights, she waited for him to nod and appear appropriately contrite, which honestly didn't take long. "You see this, kid? This is the consequence of your actions." Before tending to the puppy's wounds and summoning a chew toy, she whipped out her wand and disappeared the feathers and glue from his fur. She had to ask the child his name because she couldn't continue referring to him as kid. "There you go, Sato-san. Good as new. Now, this won't ever happen again, won't it, kid?" "No, Mahu Sama." She saw that the child went pale at this point and said, "Now, I want you to explain to Sato-san why it was that you did this." She huffed and left the room after tagging a vase with a listening spell after realizing that neither the child nor the shopkeeper wanted to speak in front of her. They wouldn't be aware of it, but she could hear. But after hearing what she had heard, she wished she had stayed to rip into Sato-san. She would no longer purchase fruit from his stand unless he assured her that the behavior would not be repeated. Bullies of any size or shape were not tolerated by her. "So, kid, why'd you do that to my Reika's puppy?" The shopkeeper didn't fully hear what he mumbled. He said it louder when asked to repeat. "'Cause you didn't want to sell me fruit last week and then only agreed to sell me some ripe pieces at an overpriced rate." Sato-san was taken aback. Yes, he did recall doing that. He did it frequently because he disliked the demon spawn, but he had never considered that this was the reason his antics were directed at him. Now that he thought about it, he realized that he was actually a half-starved kid, with a demon inside, with Mahu Sama's yell about him being a half-starved kid still echoing in his ears and a slight fear of what the witch would do if she ever found out. He was reluctantly prepared to sell his produce and charge him the appropriate amount if doing so would stop the child from picking on him for his antics. He actually lost more money repairing his stand after one of his pranks than he would have from overcharging for overripe fruit. "Listen to me, Gaki, we'll make a deal. I sell you fresh fruit at the correct price and you don't prank me anymore, got it?" In any case, he hardly ever stopped by to buy. He felt a little guilty about it because of the child's pure joy, but then again, the child was the Kyuubi, the demon that nearly destroyed Konoha 11 years prior. He turned back to pet his Reika's puppy and sent the child on his way. He didn't usually carry it with him, but he took him to work today so he could stop by the Inuzuka vet clinic after work because he needed some shots. When Hermione returned to the room, he hardly noticed. He was about to thank her when he realized she was referring to him overcharging his prices rather than the kid playing a practical joke. If I ever hear of this happening ever again, you'll receive a call from me, Sato-san. He nodded quietly as he watched the weird witch leave his store and strike up a conversation with the child. So, kid, what's your name? I'm Uzumaki Naruto, Mahu. Sama, and I'm going to be Hokage one day, believe it. As she walked them both to a restaurant, she smiled and asked, really, aside from the fact that he most likely couldn't afford it, Naruto had never eaten here because he knew they didn't sell any ramen. How big of you, to want to protect all the people of Konoha after the way they treat you. He cocked his head to the right. That was not how he had ever really considered it. All he wanted was attention. He informed her of this and observed her scowl in response to his revelation. But, Naruto-kun, isn't the job of the Hokage to protect his people and led Konohagakure no Sato into being the strongest hidden village? Why would you want to be Hokage if not for that? You can get recognition doing other things. He reflected deeply on this. She was correct. His role as Hokage was to defend the populace. People who were trash to him. But his desire remained the same. He wanted to keep the valuable people in Konoha safe. Among them were the elderly Hokage, Tuchi, and Ayame from Ramen Ichiraku, as well as Iruka Sensei, who never failed to smile and say something nice to him. She smiled and gestured to a menu item, telling him he would like it. I still want to be Hokage, Mahu. Sama, I want to protect my precious people, he saw her say. As the waiter brought their food over, they remained silent. He was disappointed to learn that the dish he had ordered consisted of a mixture of vegetables and meat. In the entire thing, not a single noodle was visible. Observing her face, he ate without saying anything more and was surprised to find it wasn't too bad. So tell me, Naruto-kun, what is it that you're doing to realize your dream? Huh? What are you doing to become Hokage? Well, I go to the academy, and you're top of the class, I assume. He had never been bothered by it before, but now he was. Well, no. The top 10, then? There are always people better at some things or others, of course. He looked at her raised eyebrow nervously and said, not really, I'm dead last. Rather than making fun of him for being dead last and wanting to be the Hokage, she simply gave him a stern look. Her voice was quiet, but he could still hear the criticism in it. That won't do, Naruto-kun. If you want to be Hokage, you have to be the best there is. Being dead last in the academy is not the way to go. She continued to explain her plan to him after he nodded in agreement. This is what we'll do. Every day after the academy you'll go over to my house and we'll review what you learned that day to make sure you got it right. You'll have to pay lots of attention since I don't know much and you'll have to teach me, alright? She wasn't sure why she felt the need to help him so strongly, but she knew deep down that this child needed all the assistance he could get, and the village wasn't providing it. She would do it since they weren't standing up to the line. During her time in the Department of Mysteries, she had learned to pay attention to those feelings, which were typically her magic alerting her to impending danger. She made the decision to speak with the Hokage about finding the boy a tutor who could teach him the other ninja arts she was unable to teach him, primarily Bukajutsu, Genjutsu, Ninjutsu, and Taijutsu. When she saw Naruto contentedly consuming his food, she grinned and decided to give him a calendar that would tell him what to eat. She knew she would have a difficult time persuading the boy, but she was confident she could do it. He needed to be strong in order to become Hokage, and he couldn't do that while eating ramen. Why are you so interested in Naruto, Granger-san? The Hokage had grown fond of the witch during her 2 years in Konoha, and it had little to do with the other brews she occasionally gave the hospital to use on their more severe cases or the amazing gift of that clear truth potion she had given him soon after her arrival. He'd learned to value the few occasions he'd had time to talk to her after she'd moved into her house, and she was pleasant and an excellent conversationalist. She lacked the psychopathic and sociopathic tendencies, but she was extremely intelligent and had a desire to learn that he had not seen since Orochimaru. He was very tempted to offer her shinobi training because she had a strong moral compass, even if it was only so she could teach in the academy later. He was confident that the students would gain a great deal, just as they had with Iruka. He had to change his perspective from that of Sarutobi Hiruzen to that of the Hokage of Konohagakure when she began to inquire about Naruto. His tone caused Hermione to squint her eyes. Despite its innocent phrasing, the question revealed Naruto's unique qualities. She explained her reasons, however, as though it were merely his courteous interest. I ran into him the other day, or rather, he ran into me, knocked me to the ground. After we set straight the matter of an abused puppy, I treated him to lunch where he told me of his dream to become Hokage. He was sighing as he said this. It seems that Naruto had shared his dream with the elderly man as well. That boy, he has potential. I can see it. His drive will lead him far. I have no doubt he will be able to become the Hokage one day, but he has a long way to get there. His eating habits are unhealthy, and certainly detrimental to both a growing boy and a shinobi in training. From what I've been able to determine, his instructors at the academy don't pay any attention to him, letting him learn things by picking up whatever explanations they give and never correcting him like they do the other students. Being such a ball of concentrated energy, he has trouble in the lectures, which leads to him not paying attention and not knowing the material, be it the theory behind practical things or his other classes. He is being sabotaged by his own teachers, and while I don't know the reason for that, I certainly cannot abide by it. This week and a half where he has been teaching me what he learns at the academy has proved that he has learned nothing from what was taught before, so I have taken it upon myself to research the topics in the library and tutor him as much as I can, but I cannot do that on taijutsu, nor any other ninja subjects. He needs a tutor who will not scorn him, nor would lead him astray. He will graduate in less than a year if he passes the test, and I'll do my utmost to see he does, but he will not be prepared for the life of a shinobi with the kind of training he has had. That's all very worrying, Granger.san, but still does not explain what your interest is in the boy. She let out a sigh. He reminds me of my best friend back at home. Harry had an awful childhood and was left in the dark about serious information which affected his life. He had a horrible burden to bear and was ill-prepared when the time came for him to take up the mantle. While maybe Naruto does not have such a burden, the Hokage grumbled inside, his childhood has been needlessly cruel and he is being thrust into a life that, if he goes to meet it like he is now, will most likely kill him. I do not wish to see another child go through that again. Sarutobi wrinkled his nose and thought about how to speak to the woman. He understood her point, and given what he had done with the Kyuubi, he was more aware than she was that the boy required the best preparation. He would have acted sooner if he had been aware of the sabotage his teachers had inflicted on the boy. He had simply assumed the boy was indolent. Learning as much as he could in the academy was essential for the boy and Konoha as a whole. The Kyuubi might eventually escape its chains if he didn't know how to master his chakra, and that wouldn't be acceptable. Ultimately, he made the decision to tell Hermione everything. He told her about the Kyuubi, the attack on the village, and the Yondaime sealing the beast inside his son, Naruto, after making it clear that this was an S-class secret and that discussing it would result in death. It would be an understatement to say that Hermione was shocked, but that shock quickly turned to rage and then rage. Soon, the reason became evident. Naruto knows nothing of this. No, the law was made to ensure the children of this generation wouldn't regard him differently and hopefully allow him to have a normal childhood. I always intended to tell him upon his making Genin, or maybe Chunin, but you can see that is not the case. She surprised him by addressing him by name, saying, "He deserves to know, Sarutobi. Sama." Up until now, she had always called him Hokage. Sama. I know you wanted to wait, but withholding such information can lead to nothing good. Allow me to tell you a story. Almost 25 years ago there was a war in magical Britain. Ultimately, after graduating from the academy, the Hokage decided to share his story with Naruto. He insisted on being acknowledged as an adult first because it would give the situation a seriousness that Naruto might not otherwise understand. Hiruzen, the Sarutobi, was disturbed. 5 months had passed since Hermione persuaded him to hire a tutor for Naruto, and the boy had made significant progress. After Shiranui Genma's initial report on the boy's abilities, he had been horrified. Because he had complete faith in Genma's skills and knew he wouldn't mistreat the boy, he had chosen him to be Naruto's tutor. Nevertheless, he briefly feared that Genma had been attempting to disprove the boy's suitability for training and to escape his responsibilities after seeing the first report. Sarutobi let his unfunded paranoia kick him in the rear as Genma continued his report by stating that he had already come up with a study plan to enhance Naruto's skills. He was troubled, though. The boy had made significant progress in his Bukajutsu and Taijutsu, but his ninjutsu was still awful, and not for lack of effort. It would be nearly impossible to teach the boy the necessary control before the final exam because of his terrible control and excessive chakra. In addition, Genma could only teach the boy for 2 or 3 hours every few days because he was a member of the Hokage's personal guard. The results of the final test before the final exam were now included in the report that he received. Naruto's scores were still low, but they weren't as far behind as they had previously been. In certain subjects, he was no longer dead last. Even though his average scores improved, he still finished last in his class, at least for the final exam. Sarutobi's other hand held the final test that would determine his fate. He banged his head on the table after taking another look at the list of skills being assessed. It seemed that Naruto would have another year to look forward to at the academy. "Do you feel ready for your exam tomorrow, Naruto-kun?" "Hi, Mahu. Sensei. Naruto resorted to referring to her as Mahu. Sama or Mahu. Sensei, despite Hermione's repeated requests that he address her by name. He had claimed that she had taught him more than the majority of his academy teachers combined, excluding Iruka. Sensei, when she had claimed she wasn't his sensei. Her name was difficult to pronounce, and he would prefer to refer to her as Mahu. Sensei or Mahu. Sama rather than ruining her name. She patted him on the head and smiled. He had discovered that the gesture wasn't condescending. Rather, it was the only physical interaction she was open to having with anyone. Even when people handed her things, she didn't touch them. Though he had learned not to pry, he wondered why that was the case. I'm sure you'll do well, Naruto-kun. When you are assigned your Genin team, you must invite them here to meet me. I'll treat your team and your Junin Sensei to some homemade food. To be honest, she was trying to gauge how well Naruto would get along with the Junin Sensei who would be teaching him. He couldn't undo the work she and Genma.san had been doing for the past few months. Naruto was depressed. Once more, he had failed. Since Mahu Sama had been so kind to him over the past few months, making sure he ate and dressed appropriately. Though he still preferred his orange jumpsuit, and occasionally sneaked in a bowl of ramen, he was unsure of how to tell him. Only she had taken him under her wing, teaching him what he should have learned in the academy and persuaded the old man to give him a tutor to help him improve his skills, which even he had to acknowledge were appalling after just a few days of Genma Sensei's guidance. Mizuki Sensei came up to him as he was kicking an empty can while strolling down the street. When he mentioned Iruka Sensei's family and explained the alternative method of graduation, he was taken aback. He would graduate so he could tell Mahu Sama and take that scroll from the old man's house to prove to everyone that he was valuable. Mahu Sama was going to be furious. He was in shock that he had fallen for such a cheap trick, but he had been desperate to pass. After Iruka Sensei gave him a cup of Ichiraku ramen, he felt prepared to face her ire as the weight of his new Hitai.8 settled on his forehead. Hermione, for her part, was overcome with anxiety. She assumed that Naruto's exam had not gone as well as they had hoped because he had failed to show up. Nevertheless, she had hoped that Naruto had enough faith in her to think that she would still be there for him in the event of his failure. She stopped when she thought about it. She had believed that whatever had broken with Ron's betrayal had somehow harmed her and that she would never care for anyone again. However, Naruto was still a young child, and she thought that any love she had for him was comparable to what a mother would feel for her child or a teacher would feel for a favorite student. Naruto still hadn't visited her, and it hurt to think that he didn't trust her. All she could do was wait, hold out hope. 20 minutes later, only Naruto could bang on her front door. Curled up with a cup of hot chocolate in her recliner, she waved her hand to open the front door from a distance. Amino.san, who appeared to be lying in a hospital bed rather than pursuing the child, soon followed Naruto. She was taken aback to see him. Since moving in, she had probably seen him 2 or 3 times, and she was aware that he disliked his former residence. Even after just a minute inside, he appeared uneasy, which did not surprise her. Look, Mahu Sama, I graduated. I can see that, Naruto.kun, congratulations. And this is Iruka Sensei. He was my sensei at the academy, he was the one giving the test, and at first I failed, but then Mizuki Sensei tricked me into getting the forbidden scroll telling me I would pass if I did, so I did, but it was a lie, but Iruka Sensei still passed me. He said all that extremely quickly, not even stopping to take a breath. Hermione concealed a tiny smile behind her cup as she recalled doing essentially the same thing in the past. Slow down, Naruto.kun. Why don't you both take a seat while I go grab something to clean Iruka Sensei's wounds and you can tell me the whole story, huh? No, please, Mahu.san. I can clean them myself at home. I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition, Amino.san. A friend of Naruto's is a friend of mine, so please, take a seat. I have a feeling this is quite the story. After confirming that Naruto was unharmed save for a few scratches on his hands from tree jumping, she vanished into her garden, where they witnessed her enter the peculiar little shelter she had constructed. Then Naruto realized something. Huh? She called you Amino.san? Did you guys already know each other? Iruka nearly grimaced. Naruto could be extremely slow at times. Yes, Naruto. She bought this house from me, as you very well know. Of course we've met. Naruto was the one who felt the impulse to face Palm this time, and he didn't suppress it. Mahu Sama had moved past his moment of foolishness by the time he returned with a box full of bottles containing various mixtures. What are those, Mahu Sama? She said, these are potions, Naruto.kun. They will help me treat Iruka. Sensei, now, why don't you start with your story? From when the academy exam started would be nice, knowing that he would have likely omitted that section given his failure. But if she wanted to help him get better, she had to know where he had gone wrong. While she occupied herself with Amino-san's wounds, Naruto began narrating his day with a half-guilty expression. After administering a blood-replenishing potion and an anti-infection medication, she had him undress up to the waist so she could tend to his wounds. She wanted to slap him when she first saw his back. How could he be out there with these kinds of wounds? He might have caused irreversible harm to something. She was aware that the man had largely retired from active duty, but it was criminal for him to show such contempt for his own body. And what a body, her treacherous mind whispered. She began healing his cuts and scrapes one by one, beginning with the largest one on the middle of his back, after applying a numbing charm with her wand. As Naruto described his awful bunshin during the exam, she listened to him and wondered idly how they could make it better. As he carried on with the tale, it turned out that it wouldn't be required. The Forbidden Scroll had taught him another technique, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The shadow clone method. Like the typical bunshin, but apparently not exactly the same. Later on, she would need to ask Sarutobi-sama or Amino-san about it. It had to be in the Forbidden Scroll for a reason. She had recovered from all of Iruka's wounds by the time he concluded his story about their dinner at Ichiraku Ramen and their journey to her home. For his part, Iruka was in awe. He had assumed that when she healed him, which he understood to mean sewing his wounds shut, he would have to grit his teeth and try not to scream, but as soon as they began, he felt his back go numb and no more pain. She gave Iruka a vial containing a mint-green potion. All done. Now, you should take this potion just before going to sleep. It will put you into a deep sleep until tomorrow morning. This will allow you to sleep through the pain, since you are still healing and the numbing charm I used will fade in about an hour. Be sure, though, of taking it when you are already in bed, as it will drop you before you even finish the glass. Try to avoid doing much physical activities for the next 2 or 3 days, or you might risk reopening your injuries. As for you, young man, we'll discuss today's events tomorrow after you get your team assignment. You won't get away from that. Now go to your place and go to bed. Tomorrow is a big day for you. Naruto.kun. And repeated the gesture twice hands, healing the scrapes he had from tree. Jumping and sent goodbye. Naruto called, "Hey, sensei," from his position affixed to a post. He and his group had just received word that they had all passed the bell test and would now be considered genin. He believed that this would be a fantastic chance to invite them to Mahu-sama's for dinner. Before losing his courage, he extended his invitation after noticing Kakashi-sensei staring at him. After all, his team consisted of his longtime crush Sakura-chan, an almost legendary Junin. Mahu-sama had somehow known who Kakashi-sensei was when she heard his name, and the Teme, whom he disliked, but Mahu-sama had insisted he invite as well. Although he wasn't sure he would accept, he could say he tried this way. All three of them gave him a mildly shocked look when he said, "Mahu-sama wanted me to invite you all to dinner tomorrow night after our first mission. Says she wants to meet you." Mahu-sama was little more than gossip in the village because she kept to herself. On the few occasions when some shinobi attempted to follow her, they were repelled by an unexplained force and were only able to reach her property line. Hokage-sama was furious about that, boy. "Mahu-sama, you say?" Naruto gave a nod. "Hi, sensei, she's been helping me with the academy these last few months, even got the old man Hokage to get me a tutor to help improve my skills. She wants to meet you all," he said. Sakura exclaimed, "Mahu-sama? We get to have dinner with Mahu-sama? Kya?" Her eyes were brimming with excitement. It seems that Naruto was unaware of Mahu-sama's somewhat larger reputation. Before agreeing, Kakashi-sensei appeared to give it some thought. Sasuke grunted to indicate that he would be there as well, seeing that the rest of his team agreed and wanting to meet the elusive figure who had been able to make even the Dobi improve his skills. Not that he had been paying attention, but he had noticed. He had to threaten to destroy Kakashi-sensei's priceless book when they began to leave while he was still bound to the pole before he was freed. "Yada. She'll be expecting us tomorrow at 7, after training, then." The meal was nearly ready, and Hermione had the table arranged for 5. They would arrive at any moment, and sure enough, Naruto-kun was knocking on the front door. When she opened it, she saw Naruto, bright in his orange jumpsuit, along with his 2 teammates. A shy girl with pink hair and a brooding boy who, until she saw his eyes, reminded her a little bit of Harry when he was younger. After the war, they all had those eyes, haunted and almost lifeless. This child was still suffering because of something terrible that had happened to him. She noticed a tall, silver-haired man reading an orange book a short distance behind them. This must be Team 7's Junin sensei, Hitaki Kakashi, based on what she knew about him. Naturally, she had asked around, and what she had heard was the stuff that would later be used to create legends. She couldn't help but feel a little let down. Then he looked up, and what she saw in that instant before his dark gray eye was obscured by a facade of happiness convinced her that all the stories were true and that perhaps, just possibly, this man was as dangerous as they claimed. "Come on in, dinner will be ready soon. I'm Granger Hermione, you may call me Hermione if you wish. I hope you're up for something new. I made food that's common in the Outer Lands to give you something different." "Thank you, Gria. Gon, Mahu. Sama," the little pinkette said, blushing slightly. That was the name Hermione had come to accept. Only Amino.san and Sarutobi Sama had been able to call her anything else thus far. She assumed that since they were familiar with her language, pronouncing her name was simpler. Since Anbu were the elite, she suspected that the Anbu who had escorted her to the bank on the first day might have been able to address her by name as well. However, since he didn't know her name, he called her Mahu. Sama, a nickname that had stuck with the villagers and her occasional pupil. As they sat around the table, Hermione waved her hand, causing the dishes on the kitchen countertop to float joyfully in their direction. Naruto's eyes were wide, too. He had not yet witnessed her perform any magic, but he was aware that she used her chakra differently than the others. Although he had been Anbu and knew how to conceal his feelings and reactions, Kakashi appeared less shocked. That's not to say he wasn't feeling as excited on the inside as a young boy who had just seen fireworks. "Ho! How do you do that?" It seems that this new experience overcame the pinkette's shyness. She pulled out her wand and whirled it around, causing the girl to be showered with flower petals. "Back where I come from, we learn to channel our chakra differently. We use wands," she said. When she waved her hand, the petals gathered into a tidy pile that quickly disappeared, and she said, "And then we can learn to do it without." Even Sasuke, who up until now had been reserved and displayed almost no emotion, was watching with interest, which pleased Hermione. "Instead of hand seals, we use certain movements with our wands and our hands to set the pathways our minds and bodies need to channel our chakra, which we call magic." Naruto was on the verge of leaping from his chair. "Could we learn how to do that?" Hermione appeared surprised. She should have known that was where the conversation was headed, but she hadn't. In retrospect, she realized that she knew a lot of things that could be helpful to them in the future. Naturally, it would require patience and time to try to teach them how to channel their chakra in this completely different way. However, she would have greater access to the team and be able to assess Naruto's new sensei more accurately. She pondered the moment she developed a strong curiosity about Naruto's teacher. Perhaps she wanted to see the Kyuubi that was sealed inside Naruto after the Hokage had told her about it. She returned to Earth when she heard Naruto calling to her. To clear her mind and concentrate on the boy in front of her, she shook her head. "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, what was it you asked?" "I wanted to know what else you can do, Mahu-sama." With hopeful expressions on their faces, the three children turned to their sensei and said, "Oh, just a little bit of this and that. I'd love to teach you, that is, if your sensei agrees." However, his response was not what they had anticipated. Kakashi was taken aback by the eager expression on Sasuke's face, but he quickly added, "Maybe later, when they've got their teamwork down." I don't think that's possible, Granger.san. They just got put together in a team and there are other things they have to work on. To the best of his knowledge, the child had no interest in anything unrelated to combat, and although he was aware that Granger.san must be familiar with some combat spells, the ones she had demonstrated to them were anything but. Although Sasuke was unsure of the precise reason for his interest, he reasoned that any skills she might impart to them would improve his own. Instead of teaching him to conjure flowers, he might even persuade her to teach him how to conjure weapons. That would be helpful now. When they departed, Hermione was a little depressed because her offer to teach had been turned down, at least temporarily. She was saddened not only because she would not be able to get to know Naruto's sensei and determine whether he was a good sensei for Naruto, but also because she had grown to like Naruto's teammates during their brief dinner date. They reminded her so much of herself and her boys. She still had a good memory of the boy Ron had been, even though thinking about him now caused new pain. He was completely transformed and warped by the fame they gained following that war. She would not have been treated the way the new Ron had been by the Ron they knew in school. Most likely. Most likely. Okay, so perhaps he would have, but at least he hadn't, so that was something. Nevertheless, Hitaki.san had mentioned that she might be able to instruct them in the future, so she spent several hours before bed creating a preliminary lesson plan. A little more than 3 months had passed since their first meal when Naruto grinned and entered her home. A rank C mission had been given to them. She was simultaneously very concerned and very proud of them. They had returned for dinner twice more. Hitaki-san was always with them, and he had kept his distance from her up to this point. He was always kind and had a smile that extended to his one visible eye when he interacted with his team. He was always courteous but a little aloof when he spoke to her. That was perfect for her. But the less said about his choice of reading material, the better. That's wonderful, Naruto-kun. What kind of missions is it? We have to protect this drunken old man until he gets home in Wave Country and then stay with him until he finishes building his bridge. It should take around 2 or 3 weeks, depending how fast the old man works. Hermione couldn't quite put her finger on what it was about Wave Country that disturbed her. Later, after Naruto had left her house but before they left early the following day, she would have to check. She had something to offer him for the time being. Come, Naruto-kun, I have something to give you for your trip. She made him follow her into her study, which was the only area of the house that was completely off limits to everyone who came to visit. It was something he had never seen before. She went around the desk, took a seat in her chair, and then pulled open a drawer. She removed what looked like a silver disc with a hole in the center from it. She summoned a tiny ball of colored light and made it pulse in a 2.1.2 pattern. This, Naruto-kun, is a beacon. You should keep it with you at all times. If you push chakra into it with the following pattern, she said. It'll let me know you're in danger and I'll be there to help you, okay? I know I'm not much of a challenge alone against most shinobi, she said, suppressing a snort. Now that she had a better understanding of what she could do in relation to shinobi, she should be able to hold herself up until at least a chunin, even though she couldn't go against the elite. But I should be able to help. If you or your teammates are in danger, or hurt, call me. If I found out you needed me and didn't call, I will be seriously pissed off, understand? Hi. So, how does it work? She held up a charm bracelet with a similar but much smaller charm, saying, it's too complex to explain, but basically, you have this and I have its brother. When you channel chakra through it, mine will heat up and allow me to find you, wherever you are. I made it so it'll only heat up after a sequence since I don't want to show up just because the charm got the edge of the chakra you used for a random jutsu. This way, I'll know if you need me. But please Naruto, it won't work if you're unconscious, so call me before that happens, okay? Hi. When I read about Wave Country, why does it bother me that's where they're going? Good, now go. You need to prepare for your trip and I have some reading to do. Within 2 hours, she received her response. She had hurried to the library, which housed regional publications from nearby nations. If one reads between the lines, the Gadu Company, which had emerged around a year ago, was attempting to monopolize the trade routes in order to gain control of Wave Country. That endeavor would be undermined by this bridge. This bridge builder was undoubtedly more problematic than he had admitted. She needed to tell someone. She obtained the directions to Hitaki-san's house after a brief stop by the Hokage Tower, where she was not surprised to see the elderly man still working. All she could hope was that he wouldn't perceive her as intruding. She patiently awaited his arrival to retrieve the door. He opened the door just as she was about to knock again, saying, Anyo, guy, I don't want to hear any more about the sprint, ga. Granger-san. Please, excuse me. She could see the flush rising on his face, which was not hidden by the towel he was holding against it at the moment. She had caught him as he was getting out of the shower, based on his clothing, or lack thereof. Drops of water trickled down his sculpted and scarred torso, and his toned body was wrapped in a towel tied to his waist. The only thing a Yamanaka would have retrieved from Hermione's mind was, yummy. For a brief moment, when all logical thought vanished, he asked if she could come in and settle in while he dressed, which startled her out of her reverie. He returned barely 5 minutes later, still toweling his silver hair dry and wearing a face mask. I'm sorry about that, Granger-san. I thought you were Guy, a friend of mine, back for another lecture on the springtime of youth. She was wondering what the devil he was talking about, but she had more important things to discuss, so she handed him a folder containing copies of the most pertinent Wave Country articles she could find. He hardly looked at her as he quickly began reading the articles she had given him. I think the mission you got might be more dangerous than what your client led on, Hitaki-san. She nodded, and he went on, this is worrying. I presume Naruto told you about the mission? Tazuna-san appears to have lied about the severity of the situation. I'll talk it over with the Hokage and request extra back up at least, or a reassessment at worst. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Granger-san. With a double tap of her fingers, the fist-sized box she took out of her coat pocket expanded back to its original size. There was something else I wanted to give you. I had it ready for your team's first mission outside the village. I've talked it over with the Hokage and we're working for this to be a mandatory addition to all missions outside of Konoha, but your council is frustratingly resistant, despite the success they have in the hospital and your T&I division. It's a selection of a few potions which would help in several situations. This one, she said, pointing to 8 identical vials on one side of the container, is called a pepper-up potion. It will keep you awake when you're falling asleep, and replenish your energy and chakra when you're about to pass out, in addition of fighting back the common cold. One vial is good for about 12 hours time. Do not abuse it, there are only 2 doses per person in this box. I'm hoping that once we're able to convince the council and I'm allowed to open a proper shop, more shinobi would have access to it and it'd become standard procedure to carry one. It could very well save someone's life. It's very similar to your soldier pills, but without the bad side effects. It does have the effect, though, of improving blood flow, so it should not be given to someone with severe wounds or someone who has internal bleeding. These 2 are muscle regeneration potions, and while normally they'd be used to attach limbs, they can be very useful in speeding up recovery when dealing with cuts. It cannot be given with a pain relief, which are these 4 here. She continued her explanation of every little bottle and ointment in her little box of wonders. He looked shocked, and she couldn't help but feel a little satisfied when she was done. A few potions from the 1st to 3rd year took the words out of his mouth, but she hadn't been able to get a proper reaction from him when she was conjuring things out of her wand. I thank you, Granger-san. I'm sure they'll be very useful. One more thing. Don't use the pepper up on Naruto. I do not know how the boost to his chakra would affect his guest, so I'd like to study his seal a bit before we give him something that might make it possible for it to get free, okay? He nodded and spent the next 30 minutes learning how to enlarge and shrink the box, no longer wondering why she knew what she did. The Hokage must have told her. He decided to change his mind about allowing her to share some of her knowledge with his genin because she was an excellent teacher. She also had a smile that would make Maeda Guy pass out in a contagious laugh. When she corrected his hands on how they should move, her hands were gentle. He could have used the Sharingan, it's true, but for some reason he didn't want to end this evening. Even though he had kept to himself thus far, he had relished the sporadic afternoons his team spent with her, and her cooking was excellent, though he wouldn't publicly acknowledge it. Additionally, he would secretly acknowledge that she was attractive, and what hot-blooded man wouldn't love being the only object of a stunning woman's attention? His Icha books served as a shoddy stand-in. Following her departure, he headed to the Hokage's tower with the folder she had left behind. The old man was furious after hearing his report. No one wanted to deal with the commotion Naruto would cause if they were informed they were being pulled out, so he pledged to make arrangements for his team to continue on this mission. Since their fees would not be covered by the mission's parameters and he suspected Tazuna-san wouldn't be able to pay them anyhow, he was unable to send a higher-ranking shinobi. He made the decision to discuss it with Tazuna-san first thing in the morning and persuade him to join a second genin team. If he refused, he could return home on his own. For such a brief mission, 2 Junin senseis should be more than sufficient, not to mention the 6 genin that would accompany them. He didn't realize how happy he would be with that choice at the end of the month. Ah, Kurenai. Kakashi. The Hokage told us me and my team should accompany you on your mission. Hi, he mentioned he'd send another team with us. What? Why do we need another team, Kaka-sensei? Sasuke exclaimed. Shut it, Dobi. As Sakura-chan cuffed him. However, Sasuke had the same question. This trip to the Land of Waves was a straightforward escort. It's unlikely that they would encounter anything more dangerous than a bandit or 2. Backup was not necessary. He was pretty sure he could manage it all by himself. They're going with us since Tazuna-san was less than honest with us about the mission's risk, he said, giving a less inebriated man a glare that would have killed him. Huh? What do you mean, Kakashi? Sensei? The inebriated old man let out an irritated "Che," and said, it means that this mission is likely more dangerous than a C rank, and so Tazuna-san here agreed to hire another team, since his other option was making his way back home on his own. From just outside the village gates, where he, Hinata-chan, and Shino-san were waiting, Kiba's loud voice could be heard saying, come on, Naruto. Why would you not want to work with us, huh? Akamaru and we'll bail you out if you get in trouble. Naruto was about to respond that he didn't need anyone to save him, but his sensei's serious glare stopped him in his tracks. Both that and the danger. He was initially furious with Mahu-sama for this, but then he was moved by what Kakashi-sensei said. Not one word, Naruto.kun. Or you can stay here. Be thankful Granger.san figured it out before we departed, or we might have brought one of you back in a box. Once more in a box. Kakashi. Sensei suspected that one of them had passed away. Okay, so he wouldn't mind if it was the Teme, but what if it was Sakura? Chan. Then they started moving. Leading the charge were Shino, Kiba, and Sasuke, then Tazuna, Hinata, Sakura, and Naruto. Every time she glanced at the boy pacing a few steps to her left, the bashful girl turned red behind the ears and appeared even more reserved than usual. Sakura became aware of this and felt both disgusted and amused. The two Junins came last. So who is this Granger.san? Kakashi. Why haven't we met her yet? Is she a civilian? When Kakashi realized what Kurenai was hinting at, he nearly choked. Che, Kurenai, you've got it all wrong. Have you heard of Mahu Sama, the witch who moved here 3 years ago? Yes, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who hasn't heard about her. I heard Ibiki threw a party in T&I a few months after she got here. Rumor has it she gave something to the Hokage, who passed it on to Ibiki, who almost cried in joy. According to rumors. Yes. The Hokage informed Asuma, who most likely informed Kurenai. She nearly stopped walking when he nodded. Wait, you're not telling me Mahu Sama is this Granger.san person, are you? She asked. Well, how do you know her? Through Naruto, actually. Apparently, he played a prank on someone's puppy and ran into her. She wasn't too happy about that, so she made him apologize and put the puppy to rights, then bought Naruto dinner. She's been looking out for him ever since. She's even treated us to dinner at her place a few times since then. She's nice. Kurenai came dangerously close to stopping again. It was practically a proclamation of unwavering love for Kakashi to say that about a woman, let alone a civilian. However, observing his discomfort with the subject, she remained silent. But she was pleased for him. Kakashi needed a decent woman in his life, but she had Asuma and she didn't think any respectable woman would ever tolerate Guy. Even if he continued to live in denial. There was an attraction there, but she didn't think he was in love yet. She hoped that Guy wouldn't find out just yet, that he would make a big deal out of it, and that Kakashi would end up separating from the girl to show him that he was mistaken. You must introduce us, sometime, Kakashi. From what I hear she hasn't made very many friends and that must be very lonely, she joked. After giving it some thought, he promised Kurenai that he would ask Naruto to present Hermione to her and her group. Perhaps some exposure to Kurenai's team would be beneficial, since she appeared to enjoy his own. Silence returned to them. Hinata was making an effort not to blush. She was making a lot of effort, but she was failing. Because she was working so hard, she neglected to use her Byakugan every 100 paces to search for chakra that shouldn't be there, as Kurenai Sensei had requested. Maybe they would have been alerted to the odd, chakra-filled puddle in the middle of the road if she had done that. However, she was attempting to avoid blushing, so the first indication of the puddle was when she stumbled and fell face first into it. Everything took place in a matter of seconds. The puddle rose up on itself and formed into a man who grabbed her by the hair and pressed his kunai against her jugular, exposing her throat. 2 chains sped through the air behind them, forcing the 2 preoccupied teachers to back off as they caught their sensei's moment of surprise at being captured. Hinata was being held by a man who snarled. They were motionless, saying, "No one moves or the little girl gets it." Their sensei were trapped. The kunai was far too close to Hinata's neck, and any movement would result in blood spilling. Now, hand over the old man and we'll let you go peacefully. We have no beef with Konoha ninjas. Naruto then leapt in the direction of the man holding Hinata hostage, saying, "Are you stupid? We're not going to hand over the old man, it's our mission to protect him, believe it." Then. The half-second hesitation caused by the Kiri.nin holding Hinata's shock allowed Hinata to use a Kawarimi jutsu. There was chaos. With their sensei in chains, Team Kurenai united against the Chunin. While Akamaru grew larger, Hinata somersaulted over to Kiba, who pushed her on her feet with his hands. She skillfully landed behind the man with the chains, who was soon defeated by her Byakugan. Precise blows because he was unable to fight and hold the sensei captive at the same time. Shino's Kakaichu covered him almost before he fell, knocking him out in a matter of seconds. The success of Team Kakashi was significantly lower. Sasuke entered the fight after Naruto's first blow, telling Naruto to back off and shouting that he didn't need his assistance. Torn between admiration and fear for Sasuke, Sakura stood motionless in front of Tazuna. Using his Kage Bunshin technique, Naruto created 10 clones that had banded together against the Kiri.nin and yelled that he was a Teme. Unfortunately, Sasuke was defeating them just as much as the enemy. "Stop attacking my clones, Teme. Then keep them away from my fight, Dobi," I don't need your help. Team Kurenai had now released their sensei, and Kakashi assumed command of the situation. The Kiri.Nin was rendered unconscious with a single, placed blow to the neck. What did you do that for? I was beating him. Shut up. Don't speak to Sass. Kurenai was startled to hear, you shut up, too. I have no patience for your games right now. Although Kakashi rarely lost his temper in this way, she could understand it in light of his team's behavior. After securing the two Kiri.Nins, she gathered her team to congratulate them on their prompt action and excellent teamwork. However, criticism accompanied the praise. She chastised Hinata for not being more aware of her surroundings, pointing out that she had tripped and had overlooked the puddle that was laced with chakra. They would have had plenty of warning in the battle if she had been scouting with her Byakugan as directed. Despite having plenty of warning, she and Kakashi had hoped to see how their genin would respond if they detected an unexpected puddle. Since they had been caught, they could have escaped the chains at any time, but their genin had to learn. Even when Hinata was under the enemy's kunai, she had complete faith in her ability to escape, but if their teams had ever been in danger, they would have responded quickly. After all, Hyuga Hiyashi had trained her, and Kurenai had witnessed it numerous times, even if he was blind to his daughter's talent. There was never a real threat to her. She also chastised Shino and Kiba for not seeing the puddle in the first place. Days had passed since the last rain. They needed to stay alert because this was a mission. They were appropriately reprimanded and pledged to improve. For his part, Kakashi was on the verge of dismissing his team and sending them back to the academy. He didn't think he could have looked Kurenai in the eye again if he had been easily embarrassed. He informed his team that he was not only embarrassed but also deeply disappointed. Shamed, Naruto was staring at the ground. His overzealousness had put Hinata in danger, and if it weren't for her fast reflexes and the enemy shinobi briefly freezing, they would have had to explain to Hyuga Hiyashi how they had allowed his daughter and heir to be killed. If Naruto hadn't intervened, Sasuke was still certain he could have defeated the Chunin. Kakashi let out an inward sigh. The boy's tendency to rely solely on himself would be difficult to break. In any case, it was not a pleasant habit. Although you could only really rely on yourself, that didn't mean you couldn't accept assistance when it was needed or that other people couldn't contribute useful skills. He was a little more forgiving of Sakura, but he made it clear that freezing was never an option. She ought to have adopted a defensive posture in front of the client, whom they were meant to protect anyhow, if she hadn't felt ready to engage in direct combat. For heaven's sake, she hadn't even drawn her kunai. With a warning that he would either see the three of them back in the academy or expel them from the ranks of shinobi if something similar occurred again, primarily referring to their complete lack of teamwork, even after months of exercises designed specifically for that purpose. His team, suitably intimidated, pledged to improve. He walked away with a resigned, "See that you do," and they went back to their strange little caravan. Perhaps collaborating with and conversing with Kurenai's team would enable them to recognize the benefits of teamwork at this point in their careers. Additionally, he would need to set up a battle between Sasuke and a Chunin ninja of his choosing. That would demonstrate to the upstart brat that he was still just a genin, regardless of how good he believed himself to be. He wanted to see how good the brat was, but perhaps he shouldn't have allowed the boy to believe he could beat him nearly evenly during the Bell's test. Now he knew that had been a mistake. The boy's confidence had been misplaced as a result. Although his confidence was admirable, this would ultimately cause him to die young. Hermione felt concerned. In contrast to what she had told Naruto, unless she deactivated it, for example, when she knew he would be training, the charm she had given him heated up whenever he used chakra. When the charm intensified just 2 days after they had left, she became worried. Had things gotten out of hand so quickly? She had to have faith that he would know when he needed her assistance, even though she nearly abandoned everything she was doing and apparated to his location. She also didn't want to make him look bad in front of his team and the other person the Hokage had dispatched to complete this task. She patiently waited for the signal for assistance while perched on her stool. She assumed they had dealt with whatever it was and returned to her brewing when it failed to materialize and his chakra calmed down rather than being abruptly cut off, which would have indicated the boy was unconscious. However, her anxiety persisted and lingered in the back of her mind like a persistent flea might infest the Inuzuka's dogs. In Tezuma's house, Kakashi was sleeping. The battle with Zabuza had worn him out. After using the Sharingan in that manner for so long, he almost passed out and was unable to move for the remainder of the trip. The bloodthirsty missing nin had not been deterred even by Kurenai's presence. In relation to that, he would have to instruct Kurenai on how to enlarge the potion box Hermione.San had given him. If he couldn't channel his chakra to enlarge it, then it was useless to anyone. All he could do was ponder the pepper. A potion Hermione.san had mentioned and wish he had the wisdom to either give it to Kurenai or one of the genin, or carry at least one dose in his pouch. It's pointless to complain about things that have already happened. Kurenai was instructing his group on tree walking outside in the meantime. He had handed them over to her until he recovered, having made it clear to his team that he would not tolerate any disrespect toward her at all. At the moment, her team was guarding Tazuna at his bridge while practicing water walking. They were instructed to take Tazuna and hightail it back to the house at the first sign of trouble. She allowed them to leave on their own since they estimated that they would be free of Zabuza for at least a week. Kurenai was taken aback that his team was still unaware of this exercise, but she came to terms with it after he informed her that he had been making an unsuccessful effort to improve their teamwork. Even though their fight against Zabuza had been much better, she could see why he had wanted them to learn how to work as a team first after witnessing the catastrophe that was that first fight. She had been impressed by that trick with the shadow shuriken and the cage buncheons. She nevertheless thanked all the gods she knew, as well as many she didn't, that she hadn't been assigned to this squad. Sakura was irritated by Sasuke's haughtiness, Sakura's fangirl demeanor, and Naruto's loudness. Furthermore, Kakashi had informed her that Naruto had started out even worse. It seems that the reason for that change was Mahu-sama. Sakura was the first to receive the exercise, which did not surprise Kakashi. By his estimation, she possessed extremely accurate chakra control. Her reserves were far less than the typical shinobi's, so she had to. To help her increase her reserves, he would need to design an exercise. If she had already depleted her chakra midway through a battle, chakra control would have been pointless. He would need to teach Naruto how to control his chakras. Yes, that would work well. Perhaps he could use the boy's cage buncheons for that. The week passed quickly. By the evening of the second day, Kakashi had managed to move and channel enough chakra to enlarge Hermione-san's box of goodies. After drinking one of the vials in the box, Kurenai was taken aback by how quickly he recovered. She was able to expand and contract the box on her own after a brief explanation and roughly an hour of instruction. They would never again be taken by surprise. Kurenai went over to oversee her own team at the bridge, while Kakashi took over the training of his team. They all understood the exercise's fundamentals after 3 days, and they joined her team at the bridge. Without the bridge, Sasuke and Naruto would keep practicing on any available vertical surface. No one wanted an accident that would make the mission even longer, even if by now they knew enough to avoid blowing whatever surface they were practicing on to pieces. However, it appeared that their mission would take far longer than anticipated by the time the 6th day in wave arrived. The majority of the bridge's workers had chosen to quit, and work had all but stopped. The genins decided to work in 2 shifts, taking turns building the bridge and guarding Tazuna. Because Naruto would make several clones to aid in the construction, Team 7's shifts were the most productive. They settled into a restless night after a very tense dinner during which the tale of Inari's stepfather was revealed. The following morning, all of them, aside from Naruto, who had finally run out of energy using his clones the day before, arrived at the bridge to discover the lifeless corpses of the few workers who had consented to carry on constructing the bridge. Time appeared to both accelerate and decelerate simultaneously. On the bridge, Zabuza and the hunter Nin who had previously saved him showed up and fought them. The mirrors trapped Sasuke in less than a minute, and Team Kurenai and Sakura surrounded Tazuna with a protective diamond. Even with the help of Kurenai and his Sharingan, Kakashi-sensei was bleeding, and the battle was difficult. Zabuza's mist rendered Kakashi's Sharingan and Kurenai's Genjutsu useless. The genin defending Tazuna became uneasy at Sasuke's cries of agony. The dense mist prevented even Hinata's Byakugan from moving more than a few paces. However, a few steps were sufficient, and when Zabuza came up behind them, she managed to yell a warning. When Shino arrived, he immediately used some of his Kakaichu, but Zabuza created a water clone that drowned the unfortunate insects. Soon after, the senseis arrived. A shout was heard. Naruto was now with them. They heard Naruto boast that he was there to save the day as the mist gradually cleared. He then entered the demonic ice mirrors of Hiku. Zabuza, Kurenai, and Kakashi were still fighting. The mist then began to lift a little more, and what they saw sent shivers down their spines. Sasuke lay motionless on the ground, pierced by multiple long needles. Additionally, Naruto was crouching and surrounded by an evil aura. According to Hinata's Byakugan, it seemed to emanate from his stomach and was both alien and a part of him. She witnessed Naruto leap at Hiku and take him out with a single blow after destroying the demonic ice mirrors. Kurenai and Kakashi both yelled at her to stay put and avoid getting in Naruto's line of sight as she was about to jump in and attempt to disable him with her gentle fist style. After noticing that Zabuza was stunned and gazing at Haku's motionless body, Kakashi immobilized him with a summoning jutsu. Using a jutsu he had created, the lightning cutter, he impaled Zabuza through the chest. The battle appeared to be won, and he let out a sigh as he acknowledged his weariness. A poor decision. Clap. Clap. Kurenai was bleeding from numerous wounds, and Kakashi was barely able to stand. Bravo. I should commend you in your zeal, shinobi, and thank you for saving me the trouble of disposing of those two. Now you are weakened and my people will take care of you easily. Now that the evil aura had left Naruto, he was heaving. The genin and the severely weakened Junin would be up against the roughly 200 thugs. What, 70? Would they be able to handle 80? Before they became overpowered? Their prospects appeared bleak. Naruto attempted to advance and position himself between his sensei and Gadu's men, but he was unable to do so. He was simply too exhausted. The amulet Mahu Sama had given him swung loose from his clothing as he fell to his knees. He knew what to do in an instant. In the hopes that she could assist, he collected his chakra and sent the distress signal. And wishing that she wouldn't kill him for not phoning her earlier, he repeated the signal, hoping Mahu Sama would be able to locate him quickly. Don't worry, sensei, I'm calling for back up. When Hermione received the distress signal, she was prepared. She had been concerned for some time, particularly after the charm on her bracelet heated up to the point where it burned her skin and heated the bracelet she wore it from. Her first clue had been this. That, she guessed, was the demon Naruto had imprisoned within himself. She was confident, though, that he would call her when she was needed. She never considered the possibility that he might completely forget he had the medallion. Nevertheless, she concentrated on her magic and vanished with an almost undetectable pop when she received the signal, which was closely followed by a repeat. She was met with a dismal scene. An elderly man was surrounded by 4 genin. Despite being covered in blood and on his knees, Naruto appeared to be uninjured. Another young shinobi was lying on the ground, unconscious. Several long needles impaled Sasuke. He was still alive, as evidenced by a tendril of magic pointing toward him. For now, he would wait. Kakashi appeared to be barely able to stand and was being supported by a female shinobi. Everyone who was conscious was staring at her in astonishment. And there were nearly 200 men with a variety of weapons in front of her, seemingly prepared to attack the motley crew of Leaf Ninja. And there was blood all over the ground. Despite the fact that they were regarded as adults in Konoha, she still thought of them as children. She became enraged. It was time to embrace the old Hermione now that she was here. When Voldemort was defeated, she buried the Hermione. The combatant. The Avenger. The one who made her opponent fearful. Her voice was icy as she said, "Leave." Imposing. The middleman snorted. He was dressed in a suit. "Who do you think you are? We'll bury you along with the shinobi? Attack? Have it your way." She scowled resolutely, pulled out her wand, and started. She first summoned a powerful wind that pounded the first line of men, forcing them to cover their faces. A few people in the distance attempted to shoot arrows at her, but the wind carried them away. She then swept her wand in an arc in front of her, enchanting every piece of trash and abandoned weapon to fly at her adversaries. Rocks, nearly unbreakable ice, and the occasional kunai caused half of the front line to collapse. Fighting against her wall of wind, the men persisted. The first person to approach her swung a spear at her, but she sidestepped and hurled a ball of fire at him, striking him in the stomach and sending him hurtling back. 3 more broke through her barrier and leapt at her, but she was doused with their blood after a cutting curse and a swish of her wand rendered them helpless. An increasing number of mercenaries were able to withstand her enchantment, but she ruthlessly dispatched them. Fire and lightning flew from her hands, but they continued to approach her. She persisted despite being anxious because she truly didn't want to use one of the powerful spells that the unspeakables had taught her. A tree appeared to grow out of the bridge, immobilizing the 2 men who were jumping at her from opposite sides, their faces snarling with bloodlust. She thought she might be hit. From behind her, 2 kunais flew, deeply penetrating the men who had nearly captured her. She thought she heard a female voice yell, "Team 8, engage." Behind her, but she couldn't spare a glance. As she caught glimpses of other people fighting alongside her, the tide somewhat subsided. The young girl, whose hair was as blue as the night sky, jumped in front of her and landed dangerously on the spear that was aimed at her side. She then thrust her hands in a straight, open-palmed strike that rendered her target's arms useless. With one more shove of her tiny legs, her allies, 2 boys, one with a dog and the other with, were back. Were those insects? As Hermione turned to her left and cursed the thug who had the audacity to attack her with a bludgeoning curse, I suppose she thought, to each their own. Sweat stuck to her forehead and blood matted her hair, but she persisted. His goons were being intimidated into retaliating by the man in the suit. Since she had learned the spell from Dumbledore, she literally took a cue from him, and a whip of fire appeared on the tip of her wand. He didn't move when she swung it in his direction because he was conceited and believed she wouldn't be able to reach him. The whip abruptly grew and encircled his neck, so that was a mistake. His severed head bounced in front of his body after a forceful pullback. Some of the thugs continued to fight, but others began to scatter. She used her whip to cut off a few legs while using her free hand to summon more lightning balls to attack the men who persisted in approaching her. About 15 of the nearly 200 men dropped their weapons because they were smarter than the typical pigeon. The others died. She breathed deeply and lowered her arms. It was the most magic she had used since the war. Despite her fatigue, she was determined to see how Naruto was doing. She heard a shout from the group of men who had given up as she was getting closer to him. She barely had time to turn around and raise her wand before a kunai flew through the air and buried itself deeply in the man brandishing a crossbow. "Die, you bitch!" she exclaimed. Glancing around, she saw Kakashi with his arm outstretched, still partially propped up by the female Junin. She gave Naruto a nod of gratitude and waved her wand, summoning all abandoned weapons and putting them out of the surrendered thug's reach. After confirming that Naruto was unharmed, she moved to Sasuke, who was nearer. As they gazed at their fallen comrade, she saw that Sakura had pulled the elderly man along with them and that they were fighting back tears. The other 3 genin approached them slowly, each with their own wounds, thankfully none of which appeared to be too severe. Sakura's voice quoted a shinobi to the elderly man. "No matter what the situation, a shinobi must kill their emotions and forfeit all feelings. You must make the mission your first priority and you must possess a heart that never shows tears." The other genin nodded. When Hermione heard that, her heart tightened. It was a challenging lifestyle. Too difficult. And incorrect. Your lack of emotion did not give you strength. Love is the source of your true strength. The affection you have for your family, friends, and fellow soldiers. Love for your village and your country. Shinobi were people, not machines. Furthermore, a human being cannot permanently bury their emotions, no matter how hard they tried. Before kneeling in front of Sasuke and vanishing the multiple senbon that had pierced him, she informed the girl of this. She used a diagnostic charm to determine the extent of the damage she could fix and another spell to stop the blood loss. She was startled to discover that no vital points had been touched, but there was a problem. Some sort of curse. With his eyes. Later, she would have to investigate that. He opened his eyes when she finally sent him an enervate. Sakura didn't waste any time in embracing him. When he failed to return it, Hermione scowled. She approached the other unconscious shinobi. She attempted to rouse him after noticing nothing more than a rather nasty blow to the head, but Kakashi cautioned her against doing so. The man he had killed was apparently his partner, and he was the enemy. It was impossible to predict his response. When she raised her wand at Kakashi, she noticed that the other woman was tense and that one of her hands was reaching for her weapons. Kakashi stopped her. "It's all right, Kurenai. This is Granger.san, we talked about her. She's on our side, fortunately." She nodded and removed her hand from her weapons. Speaking of, she would need to discuss with her genin team why she didn't react to someone who was capable of doing what they had witnessed the woman do. He nodded curtly and untangled himself from Kurenai, then sat on the ground, saying, "Let me get a look at you, Hitaki.san." After a short while, Hermione had healed the majority of his minor wounds and begun the process of healing his larger ones. Later, she would give him a potion to regenerate muscle. When she was done, she heard a disturbance coming from the town at the rear of the bridge. When she saw what looked like farmers and builders led by a child, she lifted her wand but stopped. A real child, not a genin. Child. She started laughing uncontrollably after glancing at their faces, particularly the child's dissatisfied expression. She eventually calmed down, got up wearily, and spoke to the Junin. "Let's go someplace you can rest. Where have you been staying?" "Tazuna. San's house, Mahu. Sama," the red-eyed Junin replied. Kurenai nodded and grabbed one of Kakashi's arms, swinging it over her shoulders. "All right. We'll go there, then. I'll take a closer look at all of your injuries there." While the locals dealt with the bodies and the group of thugs who had turned themselves in, her genin team led the way back. While Kakashi was floating behind her under the influence of her magic, she heard him request that one of the bodies be kept apart until they could hand him over to his partner. Hermione had just finished tending to Kurenai's wounds after dinner that night when Naruto lost his composure and erupted. "That was awesome, Mahu. Sama. Can you teach me how to do that? Please. Please. And how'd you get here so fast? It wasn't a shunshin, it's too far away, but I want to learn, please, please, teach me, teach me, teach me, teach me, teach me, teach me." She sighed at his enthusiasm. Kakashi questioned whether that was the case or if she would have shown up earlier. "I'd like to know that, too." How do you know we needed help and how did you get here? You didn't follow us from the beginning, did you? She gave a small snort. No, I gave Naruto an amulet linked to a charm on my bracelet for him to call me if he needed help. As for how I got here, it's a technique called apparition. I can probably teach you too, if you'd like, she replied, nodding to the two Junin. The genin appeared dissatisfied. And this technique can transport you anywhere? Pretty much. You must be familiar with the place you're aiming at, though the term familiar is used really loosely, or have some kind of beacon to lead you. In this case, the amulet was also a beacon. It led me to Naruto. As for the other stuff I did, it takes a lot of time and practice to get to that level. We'll talk about it more when you're back in Konoha. Now, I must be going. You still have your mission to finish. Please, Mahu. Sama, at least stay the night. What you did today must have been very tiring and we would not want you to get hurt if you use too much chakra going back home. This was Kurenai. After giving it some thought, Hermione nodded. Since apparition didn't use much magic, she didn't really need much sleep, but she graciously agreed to check on all of their wounds. Great, I can lend you something to use to sleep in, if you'd like. Don't worry. I can conjure or transfigure a nightgown for tonight. But thank you, Kurenai-san, for your concern. Very well. Grinning, she led the genin to their beds, placing the girls with Hermione and herself and the boys in the same room as Kakashi. The boys and their unwanted visitor were sharing a room while under the influence of a sleeping potion. The following day, he wouldn't wake up until much later. When Hermione waved her wand and a stunning nightgown materialized in front of Kurenai, she forced back a gasp. She gestured for her to change in the restroom. Kurenai woke up hours later upon hearing Hermione emerge from her futon. For the woman, her heart ached. It had been difficult what they had done today. And they hadn't even had a chance, killing that many men. Even she was a little disturbed by what had happened that day, despite her shinobi training and emotional control. Despite being a warrior, Mahu Sama was not a murderer at heart, and the deaths would cause her to feel guilty. She heard another voice from outside just as she was about to get up to follow her. She reclined and made an effort not to listen in. At least not too much. That was a brave thing you did today, Granger-san, Kakashi said, startling her. Her hands dug into her arms as she embraced herself, the cold night air unabated by her summoned nightgown. I did what I had to do. It wasn't brave, it wasn't even necessary, but those men were so full of hatred and greed, they'd have killed you all and not looked back. He did not bring up the Kyuubi when he said, it was necessary. You saved all our lives. I was at the end of my rope. Sasuke was down, and Naruto was exhausted. If Naruto had been in danger of dying, who could have predicted what the demon fox would have done? Kurenai, her team and Sakura, would have been able to take down maybe half of them before being overwhelmed. And the hands of children would have been stained in blood before dying. So I thank you for what you did, for what you sacrificed. They were muggles. She corrected herself in response to his perplexed expression. Civilians. Defenseless against one such as you or me, it was wrong. Do you think that Hinata being a girl would have stopped them? Sakura? They were thugs. Warriors with no honor. You saved them. You saved all of us. Make no mistake, they would have slaughtered us all and not lost a wink of sleep over it. That is if they hadn't decided to pass Sakura or Hinata around for a bit of fun. Kurenai, they'd have killed. She's a Junin and they would never have been able to beat her down enough for something like that. But the girls? Make no mistake, you did the right thing. Greed and bloodlust warped those men until they had no morals to speak of. They would have killed us all, he continued. She gave him a brusque nod while attempting to control the tears that welled up from the soul wound she had caused by killing so many people. When she felt his arms encircle her and pull her in for an embrace, she stiffened. She finally lost her composure when she heard the soothing, low noises he was making, and she resorted to crying into his shoulder. Long after she had run out of tears, they remained that way. She pushed away from him, thanked him in private, and headed back to her room as soon as the sun's rays touched the forest canopy. Watching the sun rise, Kakashi returned to his own futon as soon as he heard someone stirring inside the house. He wasn't sure what had driven him to follow the woman outside when he felt her moving through the house, or what had struck him that prompted him to console her when he saw that she was in pain, but he was relieved that he had. This was just a little part of what he owed her. Under the influence of one of Hermione's potions, they entered the room where the boy was still asleep and said, I think it's time to wake up our guest. She fired an enervate at him while pointing her wand at him. He opened his eyes slowly and then fixed each face individually. He inquired quietly about Zabuza after failing to find the person he most desired to see. Kakashi decided to respond on his own. After all, he had been the one who killed him, and hopefully it would make him angry. He was. I killed him during our battle. I'm sorry for the death of your comrade. Haku, who remembered Zabuza calling him the day before, had obvious pain in his eyes. He nodded sharply. He died a warrior. He would have wanted nothing more. His body? We asked the villagers to put it aside until you could reclaim it. Being his comrade, you would know what he wanted in this case. He was not my comrade. He was my sensei, my parent, my reason to exist. I ask that you kill me now, for without him, I have no purpose. Naruto trembled and said, No. Purpose? Haku gave a nod. Zabuza took me in after my father killed my mother, and I killed my father and the mob of villagers he had assembled to kill me for possessing a Kekkei Genkai. He raised me and taught me to be a shinobi. My whole reason to exist was to be his tool. His shield. I should have died before him, protecting him, but now that he's gone I don't have anything left, so I'll ask you again. Please, kill me. Kakashi's eye was closed. Kakashi's voice was broken by Naruto's. Are you stupid? If you don't have a purpose anymore, you must find another. You can find another dream and make that your new reason to be. A dream? Yes. A new reason, one that makes use of your life in a way Zabuza would be proud of. Do what he can't anymore and live. Realize your dreams and live for the man who took you in, for your precious person. Naruto nodded and said, My precious person. The others were simply waiting in silence to see how this would play out. Your precious people never leave you and they'd never want you to throw your life away. You must cherish them and their dreams. Haku grinned. I think I understand. Zabuza would want someone else to realize his dream, so I'll be that person. I'll make Zabuza Sama's dream come true. Curious, Naruto said, Great, and what was Zabuza's dream? To kill the Mizukage. A pin drop could have been heard. To kill the Mizukage? Yes. His reign of terror shouldn't be allowed to continue. It is because of him that people in the land of water persecute and fear those with Kekkei Genkai, and it was his idea to make students kill one another as a graduation exam. Though that particular one was rescinded after Zabuza slaughtered all his classmates, there are many policies of his that are damaging to both the land of water and international relations with other villages. Hermione made the decision to speak up. So you're just going to kill this Mizukage and walk away? Haku gave her an owlish blink. I suppose I shouldn't do that, right? Naruto sounded suspicious when he said, So you'll have to come up with a new dream, then. No, you misunderstand me. I guess I'll have to become the next Mizukage. Naruto paused, then leapt to his feet and gestured to himself. The rest of the team wanted to scowl. And I'll become the Hokage, believe it, we'll be the two strongest ninjas in our villages, they exclaimed. Haku merely gave him a smile. After lunch, Hermione went out. She expressed her gratitude to Tazuna for letting her stay and instructed both teams to notify her when they returned so she could prepare dinner for them. 2 days later, Haku departed. He had to train to get stronger and assemble enough followers to help him in his mission if he was going to kill the Mizukage. He assured Naruto that after he fulfilled his new dream, he would go to Konohagakure. 2 weeks later, the teams returned to Konoha, while Naruto went to inform Sama that they were back and to expect them for dinner the following evening. The genins dispersed to their own homes. Kurenai and Kakashi went to the Hokage to report. Sarutobi pinched the bridge of his nose and set down the papers that the two Junin had given him. I knew this mission was more trouble than it was worth. First, 2 missing nin from Kirigakure and then the demon of the bloody mist himself. It's a wonder you all came back in one piece. And what is this about Granger-san? Why was she even there? I can explain that, Hokage. Sama, then do it, he yelled back. She gave Naruto an amulet with which he could call on her if in dire need of help. After I killed Zabuza I was pretty much down for the count. Kurenai was injured as well. Sasuke was unconscious. And Naruto was exhausted. The other 4 genin had taken on a diamond formation around Tazuna-san, but they'd have been overwhelmed rapidly. Naruto called Granger-san and she engaged the thugs, saving all of our lives. He looked down at the report. So she engaged these thugs? All, he said. All 200 of them? Yes, sir. She conjured strong winds and a whip of fire while shooting fire and lightning from her left hand. Her opponents fell before they reached her as if cut down by a sword or hit with a mace. Had I not been so exhausted, I might have taken a peek with my Sharingan, but I was about to pass out and keeping that eye open would have seen me collapse. It was nothing short of impressive. After the first few, Team 8 moved in to assist, as it seemed they would overwhelm her with sheer numbers. They took them all down in less than 10 minutes. Well, all except for the 15 or so who surrendered their weapons before they could be defeated. Then, she proceeded to heal all of us before departing the next day after lunch back to Konohagakure. And she got there. How exactly? Kurenai responded to this. Some kind of jutsu, Hokage. Sama. She said it allows her to instantly transport to anywhere she's familiar with, or to any place she had a beacon to. That's what she called Naruto's amulet. She also said it didn't take much chakra at all, just control and having a clear destination in mind. She said she would teach us if we were interested. I see. It seems Granger. San's abilities are more varied than I initially thought. If I may, Hokage. Sama. Like I said, she's already offered to teach us some of her abilities. Maybe we can compile a more thorough report for you as the lessons develop. Very well. What about the other shinobi? The apprentice? Haku? Haku wasn't a missing.in. He never attended the academy in Kiri, nor is registered as a ninja anywhere. He was trained by Zabuza and became a mercenary at his service. And you let him go? Why? He hasn't done anything that would justify his apprehension by our village, and I asked him after the teams left if he would like to come to Konoha before starting his crusade against the Mizukage, but he declined, stating that he wanted to start recruiting allies for his coup d'etat as soon as possible. As it is, if he succeeds, we'll have a Mizukage who views Konoha ninjas favorably, making him a potential ally in the future. No one brought up the fact that the current Mizukage, one of the numerous causes of the Hokage's nightly headaches, would no longer exist. They had unleashed an adversary who could potentially defeat the beast and could not be linked to them. Very clever. Excellent. Very well done, you two. Relay my praise to your teams. Kakashi didn't need to be reminded that his team needed to improve their cooperation. The Hokage was certain that he already had plans for it and that he was a capable teacher. Nevertheless, he had one more request for the Junin. Kakashi, stay for a minute. As is customary, Team 7 made sure Kakashi Sensei was visible later the following day to avoid him being late for their dinner with Mahu Sama. The genin departed soon after dinner was finished, and they all had a great time. For their first magic lesson, the two Junin stayed. Magic, as you know, is nothing more than one half of the energy you call chakra, the spiritual part, to be exact. To be able to learn magic, you must only draw on this part of your chakra. If you try to mix it, my spells and other techniques will not work, she stated. Having learned to work with chakra from the library's scrolls, she had attempted to combine it with spells. Even though some spells could be modified to work with chakra, doing so turned them into jutsus, which meant that their execution was entirely different. We will start with a few basic things before we move on to apparition. I'd like to be sure that you can channel magic properly before we attempt that. While I can put you back together, I'd rather not have to do it. She demonstrated a levitation spell and other fundamental moves that they should be able to master by the end of the month, all the while smirking at their worried looks. Back in England, meanwhile, Harry, hey, Jin. What's got you so excited that couldn't wait till I got home? Hermione's answer came back. She says she got permission from the Hokage for a visit. I don't know, Jin, with the way things are, I don't really think I should leave. This thing could come to blows any day. Oh, Harry, don't you think you've given enough, already? You're not an Auror, you don't have to do this, you know? I guess, but still, Jin, I feel responsible. Responsible? The only person responsible is that good for nothing. Arg, seriously, Harry. You need a vacation. We need a vacation. You owe nothing to magical Britain, Harry, nothing. And this shit they're pulling now, I'm starting to think Hermione made the right choice and we should all move out and leave the ministry to finish destroying itself. I know, Jin. I told Hermione we'd go visit sometime, and to tell you the truth even then I was considering making it a one-way trip, too. It's just, I gave so much to be here, to defeat Voldemort, that if I go now, I'll feel as if I'm giving up. All my life, Jin, ever since I was targeted by Voldemort as a baby, even when I didn't know it, I was the savior, the light bringer, even with my current job and now. Now you don't know if you can ever be anything else, because if you try you'll feel as if you're letting down everybody else. But Harry, no one else matters. Like I said, you don't owe anything to them. They already asked too much of you, now it's time to move on and be Harry Potter, not the boy who lived, or the man who conquered, or even the Dada professor. It's time to be yourself and that I can't do here, I know, Jin. You're right, Jin. You're absolutely right. Tell you what. We'll go down for a visit with Hermione as soon as we can arrange it. If we like it there, we'll ask the Hokage for permission to settle. Maybe even bring a few other people with us. Teddy, Andy, the twins. Our friends, our family. You're right, magical Britain is going down and we should get out of here before it drags us down with it. If we don't like Konoha we can look into other villages there or maybe America. France is too close, or I'd suggest that Somewhere no one has heard of the boy. Who? Lived and where I can be just Harry. Oh, Harry, she said, bending down to give him a hug. We'll go for that visit, and if we get that approval we'll start sounding people out. The lone portrait who had been listening in on their conversation left his frame to report his eavesdropping as they were still hugging. Hermione made the decision to discuss Sasuke's eyes with him and his sensei a week later. She pulled out her wand and summoned 2 comfortable chairs because she didn't want them to stand when they entered her office. Sitting behind her desk, she made an effort to appear professional. It was the only way she could possibly persuade Sasuke to allow her to examine his eyes, based on what she knew about him. You said you wanted to talk, Granger-san. She took a deep breath and tried to gather her thoughts. Yes, Hitaki-san. It's really Sasuke here who I wanted to talk to, though. You're here as the responsible adult. When I was healing you back in the Land of Waves I noticed something wrong with your eyes, Sasuke-kun. I'd very much like it if you'd let me study them to figure out what's wrong. With a mixture of suspicion and anxiety, Sasuke questioned, Wrong, Mahu-san? Yes. The spell I used is a general diagnostic spell which pinpoints everything wrong in a person's body. Well, not everything, no spell can do that, but anything that is potentially harmful in an immediate way. But you say my eyes came up. That's not possible, the Sharingan isn't harmful. The spell detected a curse in your eyes. I will not force you to let me study them, but I ask you, implore you to let me, for your sake. Only things that have the potential to harm the individual show up with this spell, and I am very worried about you. What kind of harm are we talking about here, Granger-san? I don't know yet. It could be anything as innocuous as chakra exhaustion after prolonged use or a sealed ability, to something more ominous like blindness or death. Kakashi remained silent as he mentally listed all the Uchihas for whom he knew the cause of death aside from the massacre. Blindness or death? You're wrong, Mahu-san. No one has died or gone blind from the Sharingan, right Kakashi? Sensei? He asked. His analysis was, at best, equivocal given the number of them who had joined the Anbu Corps. With a slightly more concerned tone, Sasuke asked, No one has, right, Kakashi? Sensei? I can't give you a straight answer now, Sasuke. I'd have to go through the medical records of your family. But from what I can remember there do exist some irregularities. What do you intend to do, Granger-san? Well, first step is studying the eyes and discovering the nature of the curse behind them. After that, if the curse proves to be harmful, find a way to counteract it or remove it completely. Rest assured I'll do my best to find a way to isolate the curse so that you may retain your Sharingan. I understand it is part of your heritage and an extremely useful tool. I will, of course, leave the final course of action upon your hands, but if it is a case of blindness or death you will learn how to seal it on your own in case you need to. Could I have a moment alone with Sasuke, Granger-san? I'll wait outside. The room is warded for silence, so when you're done, you'll have to open the door and call. Take all the time you need. Sasuke arrived to retrieve her 10 minutes later. He seemed determined. He spoke after they were all seated once more. I will allow you to study the Sharingan, Mahu-san, on the condition that everything you find out is kept confidential, and records that you have be added to the Uchiha library and that you show your findings to no one else. I agree with all but the last one, she said, raising her hand to quell his grievances. I have friends who will visit soon. One of them is a healer, a proper one, not self-taught like myself. I'd like for at least her and my best friend, Harry, to help me if possible. He is the professor in defense against the dark arts and as such is an expert in curses of all kinds. I may need their input. I also would like to have the option to call on other sources for help if I find myself unable to discover the cause for myself. Kakashi and Sasuke looked at each other. However, the instructor would bow to the pupil in this situation. It was his legacy, his family. Sasuke gave a nod. Then you may only share your results with those who would help you understand and counteract the curse. No one else, including the council and the Hokage. Knowing she wouldn't get a better deal, Hermione sighed. All right. You will come half an hour earlier next time Hitaki-san and Kurenai-san have training, which ought to be enough to shoot a few different diagnostic spells your way. We'll go from there, agree? I should be part of those sessions too, Granger-san. Oh, yes, of course, Hitaki-san. I wouldn't presume to restrict access to your student. No, Granger-san, you don't understand. I have the Sharingan too. But, that's impossible, it didn't show up when I diagnosed you. She did recall, however, that she had heard from someone when she had inquired about him. However, she had written it off as a rumor. I assure you, Granger-san, I have it. Maybe the difference is that while Sasuke was born with it, mine was a gift from a fallen teammate. I see. Yes, then both of you should come earlier the days of your lessons, Hitaki.san. They showed up early for the next 3 sessions, but they didn't get much done. Her spells all mentioned the same thing. An eye-related curse. She had not yet discovered what the curse was or how it would impact them. She had only discovered that Kakashi's curse appeared to be one step more advanced than Sasuke's, and that there appeared to be stages. She hadn't had time to confirm her findings, so she hadn't told them yet. The lessons, on the other hand, were going smoothly. Kurenai and occasionally Kakashi lingered a little longer to engage in conversation. She started talking to them about her life in Britain. They talked a lot about her and their skills, but she didn't go into much detail about the specific reasons she left. That was private. One day, Kurenai even started teaching her the 3 fundamental academy jutsus. What do you mean his is more advanced than mine, Mahu.san? So far the only thing I've been able to discover, Sasuke.kun, is that this curse has stages, and his is more advanced than yours. More so, his appears to be dormant. Dormant? Yes. As if it's already ran its course. Maybe it's the fact that his is incomplete. He has only developed 2 tomo, while I have all 3. Hermione gave a headshake. No, I took that into account. Both 2 and 3 tomo count as stage 1. Yours is more advanced than that. And as far as I can tell, your Sharingan, Hitaki.san, is always on its released form, though I still do not know why, stage 1, but there is a second form behind it, stage 2. Sasuke slammed his hands on the table as he got to his feet. He has the Mangekyo Sharingan? The what? She asked, glancing at Kakashi, who seemed equally perplexed. The second stage of the Sharingan, known as Mangekyo Sharingan, was kept a secret within the clan, and the only reason I am aware of it is because of that man. Told me that you had to kill the person closest to you in order to obtain it, he muttered to the ground. Hermione let out a horrified gasp, and Kakashi was transported back to the day when Rin had crossed his Chidori's path. Kakashi quickly ended the conversation because he couldn't and wouldn't face the memory, and when it was time to leave, he shunned the office. Hermione gazed at the chairs that were now vacant. Kakashi. After giving Kurenai a 1-on-1 lesson, Hermione asked, so, care to tell me what really happened? And gain some new skills in the process. Now that she was proficient in all 3 of the fundamental jutsus, Kawarimi, Henge, and Bunshin, she had already made the decision to boost her chakra, the entirety, not just magic, reserves in order to execute the Kage Bunshin safely. Not knowing it was far too beneficial. I'm sorry. With Kakashi and Sasuke. Oh, don't look at me like that, I've known for quite a while that they've both been coming here earlier. My guess, it has something to do with those eyes of theirs. So, what happened? Hermione let out a sigh. She told the red-eyed Junin that she couldn't really tell her much because of their agreement with Sasuke, but she did her best to explain. I can't really say much, and it's kind of personal, but our discussion brought what I can only guess to be some very unpleasant memories forth. Hitaki.san, he left. Didn't say anything much after the topic was brought up, he just shunshined out of my office. Kurenai's eyes were closed. She could only speculate as to what terrible relic from Kakashi's past she had to relive today. She was aware that his Sharingan originated from a deceased teammate, whom Kakashi visited in the mornings and occasionally at night. I think I know where he is. I don't think he'd like to be disturbed though. When he goes to that place, he usually wants to be alone. I wouldn't worry too much, Hermione. Kakashi's a strong man. He'll be back tomorrow acting as if nothing happened, you'll see. Hermione could only hope the other woman was correct as she nodded. She could only hope, recalling the expression of unadulterated agony in Kakashi's lone visible eye. She was standing in front of a mirror, staring at her reflection, 30 minutes later. I really don't know why I agreed to this. I do. You were about to face a night of wallowing, and I insisted. You could not resist. It was true in a way. Kurenai had assumed that she intended to spend the remainder of the evening moping over the mess she had made of the conversation with Kakashi and Sasuke. Not that it was Hermione's fault, but she felt it was. And she had demanded that Hermione go with her to meet some of the other Junins. She only knew that when Kurenai asked her to think about it, something inside of her that she had believed to be buried deep inside had risen, and she had responded, yes, before having had a chance to think it through. The same spot that had stirred when she had healed Amino-san's wounds, when she had caught Kakashi emerging from the shower, and when he had embraced her following her murder of all those men. The part of her that she believed Ronald had killed with his adultery was the part that yearned to fit in, to have friends, a lover, and a companion. She was prepared to go out with her red-eyed friend, she assumed. At that, she grinned. She had a true friend at last after 3 years in Konoha. Naruto didn't matter. More than anything, He was a cute but hyperactive puppy that she occasionally had to watch and assist with training. She was still not sure if Hitaki.san qualified as a friend. She had undoubtedly believed they were well on their way there prior to Wave. Her conviction had been solidified that evening. However, after they returned, she occasionally felt that he was attempting to avoid becoming too close. Loud laughter erupted from their table. The noise they were making would have greatly embarrassed the Hermione who had lived in Britain, especially prior to the war. However, after the war and particularly after relocating to the elemental countries, she discovered that her inhibitions were lessened. Then there was the large quantities of alcohol she had drunk. She wasn't inebriated by any means, but she was extremely inebriated and headed toward the former. Asuma, Kurenai, Guy, Genma, Rida, and the other Junin were currently telling stories about their genin teams, either from their time as genin or the teams they were currently training. Currently without a genin team, Genma and Rida shared some of their more humorous, unclassified missions. With a little help from her magic to make illusions come to life and better illustrate them, Hermione had told some of her own stories, the humorous ones. Asuma was now narrating one of his stories from his time as a daimyo guard. A flying squirrel, a vat of honey, an enemy spy, and the sister of the daimyo were all involved. Kakashi approached the table as he was about to reach the punchline, where the squirrel flew through an open window. Their table erupting in laughter once more concealed his arrival, but Hermione saw him right away. She didn't see anything, as Kurenai had stated, and the fact that she didn't know him well suggested that their earlier conversation had ended awkwardly. He said, "Yo," as the laughter subsided a little. "My eternal rival. Have you come to regale us with stories of your springtime of youth?" Kakashi cocked his head and answered, "Huh? You said something?" Guy muttered something about hip and cool, but Hermione wasn't nearly inebriated enough to try to interpret it. The most inebriated of them all, Genma began to cram herself further into the booth so Kakashi could join them. Next to her, Hermione was returned to her 4th year and another person who was unable to pronounce her name. "You can sit here, Kakashi, just beside Hermione, Hermione," she exclaimed. At that, she couldn't help but chuckle. "Hermione. Her name's Hermione, Genma," he clarified, settling into the tiny space that had become available on the booth's edge. He turned to face her with what she was certain would have been a deadly smile, had she been able to see it beneath his mask. When she gasped. She had no idea he even knew her name, much less how to pronounce it correctly. As she had done ever since she had met him, she pondered what the mask concealed. She had heard Team 7 speculate about fish lips once or twice, so she knew it couldn't be a horrible disfigurement because the mask wouldn't fit as well. She was really tempted to try to see the face behind the mask, but she would later blame the alcohol. She realized she had been staring when Kurenai, she assumed, kicked her from beneath the table. She blushed, averted her gaze, and began narrating a tale that Naruto had shared with her about one of his escapes from Anbu. Before long, the table was chuckling aloud once more. But when Rida went on to explain the other side of it, she did a double take. Apparently, he was one of the Anbu assigned to apprehend young Naruto at that time. The evening went by in this manner, with the Junin sharing more stories and anecdotes than she did because her stories required some background information to be understood. Nevertheless, she had a great time overall. They parted ways when the bar owner came up to inform them that the establishment was closing and they needed to leave. When Hermione noticed Kurenai dangling from Asuma, she grinned because she knew exactly what they were going to do next. Guy left with Genma and Rida. It appears that they shared a Junin complex. As they strolled home together, she was shocked to see Hitaki.san waiting for her when she turned to walk back to her house, which was on the opposite side of town from the Junin, because she had somehow assumed he would accompany them even if he hadn't. "Simply, I'll walk you home," he said. "There's no need, Hitaki.san. I can take care of myself." He remained motionless as he stood there. "Still, Granger.san, I'd like to walk you home. You've seen what I can do. While I wouldn't apparate while drunk, you know very well I can take anyone who might be stupid enough to attack me, even if I have had a bit to drink." This presented Kakashi with an opportunity. Even though he was devoted to the village and the Hokage, he had not enjoyed being questioned about the witch's skills. He was fond of her. As a person, not romantically, though he was fairly certain Kurenai was persuaded of that. And it had been a long time since he had liked new people. In addition, he owed her both his own and his team's lives. However, he had a perfect opportunity because the Hokage had ordered. They set off on foot. "Anyone?" "Well, not anyone. I'm quite certain I couldn't go up against you, even if your abilities have decreased so much in the last few years, but the run-of-the-mill Junin? It wouldn't be easy, but as long as it's not a one-hit kill shot, I'm sure I'd be able to get away. While I wouldn't want to apparate drunk, I can certainly do it." He laughed, attempting to downplay the inquiries. I meant in a fight, actually, he said. However, he was a little annoyed that she made fun of his skills. They hadn't really declined, had they? He waited while she considered it. In a direct fight. I'd say, and once again this is discounting one-hit kill shots, I'd be able to take down up to a high Chunin. If I were faster, I'm sure that would change, and I could probably go against some of your Junin. She smiled, pleased with her response. On his side, Kakashi was a little doubtful. He had witnessed her fighting those thugs, but ninja, particularly Chunin and Junin, were a completely different matter. Are you sure you're not underestimating Konoha's shinobi? She gave another nod. While I'm sure I haven't seen all a shinobi can do, you have not seen everything I can do, either. Of course, what I can and what I'm willing to do are two different things. He gave her an odd look. How so? He saw that she didn't wait for his nod before asking, well, you know how there's missing nin. And how you know the same things, or some of the same things as missing nin. Well, in the same way, as there exist missing nin, there are dark witches and wizards. And I know a lot of the same stuff they do. Stuff that most people don't. I'd never use it, but the knowledge is there. She turned and saw that they were at the entrance to her land. She exuded a spooky sense of strength and mystery as the moon shone on them both. Kakashi was confronted with the fact that Hermione was a stunning woman, not for the first time since they first met. To the eye used to the typical female of the elemental countries, it was even exotic. He might have acknowledged that he was attracted to her if he had been even slightly honest with himself about his feelings for the other sex, something he had not been for almost 12 years. Even though he knew the truth in his heart, he was still able to resist her next words. I am a very dangerous woman, Hitaki Kakashi. And he was reassured by the expression in her eye when she said that. But he grinned, and he uttered equally softly, I am a very dangerous man. She had barely shut the door after entering her home when her voice could be heard over the threshold. Yes, you are. He continued to stand there until the light in what he knew to be her bedroom went out. With a sigh, he reached into his hip pouch and pulled out a worn orange book. He had a lot on his mind. Over the next several days, the conversation with Hermione continued to bother him. He had informed the Hokage, who appeared to share his skepticism regarding her conviction that she could compete with a Chunin. Nevertheless, they had agreed to be cautious about her abilities because it was better to be safe than sorry. The Hokage at least knew that Hermione wouldn't hurt Konoha. He knew from her account of her recent arrival that she wouldn't rebel against the village as long as they didn't betray her like her own people had. He hadn't told the Hokage about one of her remarks, though, and it continued to bother him. He hadn't wanted to give the Hokage cause to doubt him because it was personal. He was unable to look for Asuma since he would feel compelled to tell his father about it. He was unable to discuss it with Kurenai, who would then bring it up to Asuma, for the same reason. He was also reluctant to ask Guy the question because he thought the man would view it as a personal challenge. Because they weren't close enough, he wouldn't tolerate Anko laughing at him. He sighed when he understood that Hermione herself was the only person he could ask what she meant. This is the reason he ended up in front of her house that night following team training. He hadn't knocked yet after 10 minutes of being there. For the 5th time, he lifted his fist to knock, but was stopped by a voice behind him. He hadn't seen her since the night Kurenai had pulled her out to drink with the Junins a few days prior, so he said, Oh, Hitaki-san. I didn't expect you here today. I thought lessons with Kurenai were not until tomorrow. As he watched the sun flare behind her, creating the illusion that she had a flaming aura, he thought, nature has a twisted sense of balance. Observing that she was waiting for him to continue, he clarified, You're right, I'm not here for a lesson. I was wondering if we could talk, privately. She led him inside after unlocking the door, saying, Oh, right. Of course. Kakashi remained silent until she was seated on the opposite end of the couch while he watched her make some coffee. What did you want to talk about? It's something you said the other night that bothered me, actually. I thought about asking someone else, but then again, he paused. He was using his words too freely. You said something about me not being as good as I used to be. What exactly did you mean by that, Granger-san? That was wrong of me to say, Hitaki-san. Please, forgive me. I was drunk and shouldn't have said that. You must have had some reason, though. I won't be upset, but I need to know why you thought that. His reputation could have been severely harmed if someone had spread rumors that he wasn't as skilled as he was. He was confident that he could handle any assassination attempts by himself, but he did not want to endanger his team. And what if she had a real reason, even though he hated to consider it? What if he had actually slipped? Well, not much, really. She inhaled deeply. He nodded at her to go on, even though he had no idea how this connected to his question. When I first met Naruto, he was very lonely. His teachers sabotaged his education and he had no friends. No adults in his life except Hokage, Sama and a couple at a restaurant. He considered Amino.san a precious person, too, but he was only his academy teacher who occasionally took him out for ramen, not really a parental figure. I took an interest in him, as you know, tried to tutor him in his academy classes, got Hokage Sama to assign a tutor for him in the shinobi arts I could not help him with. When I heard from him that all genins were assigned a team sensei, I was curious. I, with Genma's help, had managed to undo much of the sabotage his instructors from the academy piled on him. I didn't want him to go to a Junin instructor who would treat him like that again. She sighed and fiddled with her cup, likely to get her thoughts together. She went on, and he was shocked to see that her cheeks were flushed. I asked around, did a little eavesdropping. I managed to find out who the Junin senseis for this generation were. After that it was easy enough to go to the library and research them. I was extremely surprised by what I found on some of them. You and Asuma.san certainly seemed grossly overqualified. When Naruto told me you were his sensei, I dug a little more. Here, she stopped and gave a wide grin. You have no idea how easy it was. A few placed transfigurations and glamour charms, bad lighting, she went on. You won't tell anyone, will you? I really don't want to get in trouble over this. If you broke no laws, you can be assured of my silence. She sighed. Well, I headed to a few of the bars that usually catered to shinobi. Struck conversations with some of the most drunk ones. Like I said, a basic disguise, no one knew I didn't belong. A few placed comments and most of them were merrily wagging away about copy ninja Kakashi, apprentice of the late Yondaime Hokage. I even heard about you having the Sharingan, but when my scan on you back in Wave came back negative, I thought it was just rumor. The more alcohol the freer their tongues got. Tales of your missions and abilities. Your techniques, your successes, of course, the woman said. She cleared her throat and went on, clearly mocking that, saying, I also got tales of your other successes. But now he wanted to know what the Kunoichi people thought of him. He hadn't been in a relationship for years, but he hadn't been alone in bed either. To cope with the stress of their everyday lives, the majority of shinobi required the release of sex. Guy was the perfect example of what happens to a shinobi who is sex-starved. And, in any case, she added, I suppose some of those tales might have been inflated with time, or just your run of the mill rumor chain. According to those rumors, you could have taken down Zabuza and his apprentice, all 200 thugs, and still have enough energy to enjoy the spoils, so to speak. I realize, of course, that using your eye exhausts you, but then again, she stopped when she noticed that he was frowning. I'm sorry. I have offended you. I should not have said any of that. I am intruding, and relying in rumor to find out your abilities was beyond foolish. No, Granger.san. I am not offended, he sighed. He wished they could do away with the formalities and that she was more of a friend than an acquaintance. He was sick of constantly apologizing and watching what he said. I was thinking about what you said. Up until that night I really thought I hadn't let myself go as much. Of course the edge I gained in Anbu would have been dulled some, but hearing you describe it like that, I have let myself go much more than I thought I had. This is not good. 10 years ago you would have been right. I'd have been able to deal with both the Demon of the Mist and his apprentice plus any amount of thugs Gadu decided to throw at my back like Kurenai. Not to mention the spoils. His thoughts of that night. He drained his coffee, smiled at her, and shook his head to get rid of the tempting image. Thank you, Granger.san, for your input. You have certainly given me a lot to think about. And the coffee. As always, your coffee is delicious. I must get going now. You're welcome, Hitaki.san. Though there is one thing I wanted to ask, and since we appear to be in a sharing mood.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.